My husband moved another woman's crib into the room I had prepared for our daughter and expected me to thank him for his mercy. He had taken down the wooden nameplate that read Iris Rose, rolled her bassinet out into the hallway, and placed Danielle's gray crib directly beneath the mobile of watercolor clouds I had painted by hand. Gideon looked at me as if I were the one being unreasonable, as if a mother's heart shouldn't bleed silently when her child is systematically erased from her own nursery. "Don't make a scene," he said, keeping his voice low, because Danielle was standing right behind him, Silas balanced on her hip. She had nowhere else to go. I didn't scream. I didn't throw the crib. I didn't ask him when he had decided my daughter's place in our home was negotiable. I simply pressed Iris closer to my chest, looked up at the tiny camera glowing above the bookshelf, and remembered that every single second of life in this room had been saved to the cloud since the day we brought her home from the maternity ward. Then I walked past Gideon, took Iris's newborn photo from the dresser, slipped the silver key off my ring, and laid it on the empty shelf where her hand-knit blanket used to sit. "Keep the room," I said. Gideon blinked, but I was already walking away with my daughter, leaving behind the only thing he had preferred over us, an empty room full of evidence. The first thing I saw when I opened the front door was a stroller that didn't belong to us. It sat in the entryway next to Gideon's leather dress shoes, blocking the narrow strip of afternoon sunlight that usually hit the hardwood floor at exactly 3 p.m. It was an expensive, matte black Upa Baby Vista, the kind with polished metal joints and a leather handlebar cup holder. A pale blue blanket hung over one side. For a second, my exhausted mind refused to process it. Iris was asleep on my shoulder, warm and heavy. Her tiny fist was tucked under her chin. I had just brought her back from her scheduled 3-month well-child checkup. The pediatrician said she was growing beautifully, hitting her milestones. I had nearly cried in the clinic parking lot out of sheer relief, because every ounce gained still felt like a hard-won victory after those terrifying first weeks of latch struggles and tongue-tie revisions. I slowly walked around the stroller. Near the entryway console table stood 2 suitcases. One blush pink, the other navy blue. My house smelled wrong. Not dangerous. Not dirty. Just wrong. A heavy note of vanilla perfume, a foreign brand of laundry detergent, and the faint, slightly sour smell of a different baby's formula. I held Iris tighter. "Gideon?" I called out. From upstairs, a soft laugh drifted down. Not Gideon's. A woman's. The sound made my heart slam heavily against my ribs, and then a strange, quiet stillness washed over me, a coldness that terrified me more than any panic could. I looked at the framed photos on the console table. Our wedding in Maine, Gideon holding Iris in the recovery room, me standing in the nursery before she was born, hand on my swollen belly, smiling as if I had built a perfectly safe world with my own 2 hands. The laughter drifted down again. This time it was followed by Gideon's voice. "Careful, that shelf is a little loose." I walked toward the stairs. Every step hummed with a dull, familiar ache. I was still healing. My body still partially belonged to childbirth, pelvic floor physical therapy, stitches, milk production, and pure exhaustion. I had learned to move silently, because any sudden jerk could wake Iris or tear something fragile inside of me. But by the time I reached the second-floor landing, my breath was coming in shallow drafts. The door to Iris's nursery was wide open. It was never supposed to be open like that. I always kept it cracked just a sliver, just enough for the soft glow of the nightlight to spill out. This room had been my sanctuary. I had painted it myself during my 7th month of pregnancy, standing on a stepladder with swollen ankles while Gideon told me I was being stubbornly nesting obsessed. Pale cream walls, blush pink linen curtains, the hand-painted cloud mobile hovering over the crib, a bookshelf filled with classic board books color-coded by spine, and that little wooden sign on the door that said Iris Rose in delicate white script. The sign was gone. I froze in the doorway. My eyes swept over the room, registering shapes before my brain could process the betrayal. The pink rug was still there. The glider still sat by the window. On the bookshelf, Goodnight Moon, The Very Hungry Caterpillar, and the little plush bunny my sister Audrey had brought to the hospital were untouched. But Iris's bassinet had been pushed into the hallway, wedged unceremoniously between the wall and the laundry hamper. Her white wooden crib was no longer in the center of the room. In its place stood a gray crib that matched the matte black stroller downstairs. New sheets, a blue blanket, and plastic storage bins of tiny boys' clothes underneath. On Iris's changing table lay a pack of Pampers, in a size 3, not her size. Danielle Ashford was standing by the dresser, Silas balanced on her hip. She turned when she saw me, her face instantly melting into an expression of soft, rehearsed sorrow. She was wearing one of Gideon's old Georgetown University hoodies. I recognized it immediately because I had folded it and put it in his drawer just last week. "Sylvia," she said, her voice dropping into a gentle, hushed tone. "I was going to text you." I looked at her son, who appeared to be about 6 months old. He had chubby cheeks, dark hair, and wide eyes that stared curiously at Iris's sleeping face. Gideon stepped out of the walk-in closet, holding a stack of blankets. My blankets, the organic muslin ones I had washed twice in hypoallergenic, fragrance-free detergent before Iris was born. He froze when he saw me. "Sylvia," he said. In that moment, I hated the way my name sounded in his mouth. I had never hated it before. "What is this?" My voice was thin, not loud or dramatic, just stretched to its absolute limit. Gideon's eyes flicked to Iris, then to Danielle, then back to me. "Danielle had an emergency," he said. Her apartment flooded. The ceiling literally collapsed right over Silas's crib. She had nowhere safe to put him. I stared at Gideon's hands. The blankets were pressed against his chest. One of them had tiny lavender roses embroidered on the hem. "And so you put him in here." Gideon let out a long sigh before answering, and that sigh told me everything I needed to know. It was tired, irritated, and patronizing, the exact sound he made whenever I asked him to sanitize the bottles, and he thought I was being excessively paranoid. "Just for a few days," he said. "Maybe a week. We can talk about this. We can figure it out." "You moved Iris's crib. Her bassinet is in our bedroom for now. It's temporary." "No." My voice was flat. I turned and looked into the hallway. "Iris's bassinet is out there." "Where is her crib?" "In the guest room," Gideon replied, his tone defensive. I didn't want to clutter the hallway. My daughter stirred in my arms, her little mouth puckering. I instinctively swayed, rocking her back into a deep sleep. Danielle took a small step forward. "I told him I could sleep on the sectional downstairs," she said softly. "Seriously, Sylvia, I didn't want to cause any trouble." I looked at the hoodie she was wearing. I looked at her bare feet sinking into my pink rug, her baby's diapers on my daughter's changing table. "You didn't want to cause any trouble," I repeated. Gideon's jaw tightened. "Don't do this, Sylvia." "Do what?" "Don't turn this into something cruel. She's a single mother with a baby, Sylvia. She has no safety net. And what am I?" Silence hung heavy in the room. Gideon looked genuinely confused, as if that question had never even crossed his mind. I was 3 months postpartum. For weeks, I had slept in 90-minute increments. I had bled through hospital pads while Gideon answered work emails. I had learned to nurse through cracked skin and tears. I had sat in this very room at 2:00 a.m., counting Iris's breaths because postpartum anxiety had wired my nervous system to expect disaster. I had prepared every single inch of this room. Gideon had watched me do it. He had watched me wash the curtains, label the drawers, sand down the rough edge of the bookshelf, and save up for the high-end crib because I wanted her to have one safe, beautiful space that would last. He had watched me tie the ribbon on her first tiny dress. And now, he was looking at me as if my pain was nothing more than an inconvenience to his charity. Danielle shifted Silas higher on her hip. "I can pack up. I really don't want to get between you two." But she didn't move. Gideon stepped toward me. "Look, Iris sleeps in our room most nights anyway. Silas is older. He needs the floor space. It's just temporary." My gaze drifted to the top shelf above the glider. The small Nest security camera was still there. A tiny white dome hidden between a plush fox and a stack of board books. I had installed it the week we came home from the hospital because I was terrified of SIDS, terrified of missing a silent choke, terrified of being a failure of a mother. Gideon had teased me about it. "You've turned the nursery into Fort Knox," he'd said. Right now, the tiny green status light was glowing. It was recording. Gideon followed my gaze for a split second, but he didn't register what I was looking at. He never paid attention to the systems that kept our lives running. He only enjoyed the comfort they provided. "When did you do this?" I asked. "This morning," he said. "While you were at the pediatrician, you knew I was taking Iris to her appointment?" "Yes." "You knew I would be coming home with her?" "Yes, Sylvia, obviously. I thought we could sit down and talk about it like adults. I let out a soft, sharp laugh. It sounded ugly and hollow. You thought I would walk in, see another child's crib in my daughter's nursery, and have a rational, adult conversation about it? Gideon lowered his voice. Don't wake the babies. The babies. As if they were a matched set. As if Silas had any claim to this house. Something inside me turned colder than anger. Danielle finally moved, but not toward the door. She walked over to the glider, my glider, and sat down with a sigh, settling into the cushions as if the room had already accepted her body. Silas started to fuss. She rocked him, murmuring, "It's okay, sweet boy. It's okay." Gideon looked relieved, as if her presence in the chair gave him permission to patronize me. "See?" he said gently. "This is exactly why I wanted to avoid a scene." "A scene," I said. He rubbed his temples. Danielle is exhausted. Silas has had a rough week. I know this is hard for you, but can you please try to look at the bigger picture? The bigger picture. I looked at the doorway where Iris's name had been scraped off. I looked at her bassinet abandoned next to the laundry hamper. I looked at the crib another woman had chosen, placed directly under the mobile I had painted while my back ached, and Gideon told me to stop nesting so hard. I adjusted Iris in my arms and walked into the room. Gideon reached out maybe to stop me, maybe to touch my shoulder. I flinched away before his fingers could graze my skin. I went straight to the dresser. The silver-framed photo of Iris from the hospital was gone. It had been pushed behind a stack of Silas's diapers. In the photo, she was 2 days old, her face red and wrinkled, swaddled tightly like a burrito. Gideon had cried when the nurse took that picture. I remembered that. I hated that I remembered that. I picked up the frame. "Sylvia," Gideon warned, his voice dropping an octave. I opened the top drawer of the dresser. Iris's tiny socks had been pushed to the far corner to make room for blue onesies. My hand shook exactly once. I closed the drawer quietly. Danielle watched me from the glider, her expression entirely too guarded. She wanted me to explode. I saw it then, the faint, microscopic twitch at the corner of her mouth, hidden from Gideon. Her thumb stroked Silas's back while her eyes measured my reaction. She wanted proof that I was unstable. She wanted me to scream. I gave her silence. I walked over to the wall beside the door and touched the 2 sticky adhesive squares where Iris's nameplate had hung. "Where is it?" I asked. Gideon frowned. "Where is what?" "Her name." He glanced toward the closet. "I put it in there so it wouldn't get damaged. You took my daughter's name off her door. It's a wooden sign, Gideon." "Sylvia," Danielle murmured. I'm sure he didn't mean anything by it. I looked at her then. Really looked at her. Her cheeks were flushed, her hair pulled into a messy bun that probably looked effortless to Gideon but looked entirely calculated to any woman with eyes. She looked tired, yes, but not desperate. She had a fresh manicure, and her diaper bag on the floor was a designer diaper bag. Silas's blanket had his name embroidered in navy blue thread. Silas had his name. My daughter had been stuffed into a closet. I walked past Gideon into the hallway. I found my diaper bag by the stairs where I had dropped it when we came home, and I slid Iris's newborn photo inside. Then I walked into our primary bedroom. Gideon followed me. "What are you doing?" I opened the nightstand drawer and pulled out Iris's medical folder, her birth certificate, her health insurance card, her pediatric records, and the printouts from today's appointment. My own postpartum discharge paperwork was underneath, folded in half. "Sylvia." I grabbed my breast pump charger, 2 bottles from the drying rack in the master bath, and my wallet. My phone was already in my coat pocket. Gideon stood in the bedroom doorway, partially blocking the exit. "Stop this." I looked at him. "Move." His face shifted. A flicker of genuine uncertainty crossed his eyes. "Where are you going?" "I'm leaving with Iris." He let out a sharp breath. "You can't just take my daughter and run because you're jealous." There it was. The word he had been waiting to use. Jealous. Not hurt, not betrayed, not furious, that he had reconfigured our daughter's life without my consent. Just jealous. Danielle appeared behind him, still holding Silas, her eyes wide with performative concern. "Gideon, maybe let her cool down?" I zipped the diaper bag. Gideon turned slightly to her. "I've got this." He turned back to me. "Sylvia, get a grip. You are not thinking clearly. I have never in my life thought more clearly. Move out of the way, Gideon. Listen to yourself. Just then, Iris woke up. Her face puckered, and a tiny, sharp cry escaped. Her mouth hurt, hungry, and very much alive. The sound cut through the room like a truth no one could argue with. Gideon looked down at her, then up at me. "Don't do this to her," he said, his eyes turning cold. "You did this to her," I said, holding his gaze. "The second you took away her room." He sneered. "For God's sake, Sylvia, it is just a room." I stepped closer, until there were only inches between us. "No," I whispered. "It was the first place in this house where she had a name." His face twitched for a fraction of a second. I thought for a fleeting moment that he might actually understand. But then, from behind him, Danielle's baby started to cry. Gideon looked back. It was a single, instinctive, protective glance, but it was enough. I pushed past him while his attention was divided. Downstairs, I slid my feet into my flats, not bothering to pull up the heels. I grabbed Iris's car seat from the entryway. My hand reached for the key hook next to the console. The house key, the mailbox key, the car key, and the small silver key to the side gate. I slowly took the house key off the ring and laid it on the console. Gideon was coming down the stairs behind me. "Sylvia, stop acting like this is a movie. Stop the drama." I picked the key back up. Not there. I walked back up the stairs. Gideon followed, confused and irritated. I went back into Iris's nursery. Danielle was standing now, holding Silas. The room smelled of her vanilla perfume and my daughter's baby lotion underneath a combination that made my stomach turn. I walked over to the shelf where Iris's blanket had been. It was empty now, except for a small ceramic lamp. I laid the silver gate key there. Gideon stared at it. "And what is that supposed to mean?" I adjusted Iris against my shoulder. Her cheek pressed against my collarbone, her mouth blindly seeking comfort, trusting me to know where to take her. "Keep the room," I said. Danielle's eyes flickered. Gideon's face went entirely blank. "Sylvia." I walked out. This time, he didn't try to block me. Maybe he thought I would get to the driveway and turn back. Maybe he thought the diaper bag was a prop, the key, a dramatic gesture, my silence, a temper tantrum. He had always mistaken my restraint for weakness. At the front door, I stopped. The black stroller was still blocking the entryway. I kicked it out of the way. It hit the drywall harder than I expected, leaving a dark scuff mark. Gideon flinched. "Hey! Careful. That's expensive." I looked back at him. That was what made him flinch. I saw it, but I said nothing. Outside, the afternoon sun was blindingly bright, and the air was cold enough to sting my face. I buckled Iris into her car seat, with hands that didn't start shaking until the chest clip clicked into place. Gideon stood on the porch. "Where are you going?" he yelled. I closed the door on the nursery where my daughter was no longer a resident. I got into the driver's seat of my SUV and locked the doors. He came down the steps. "Sylvia, open the door." I started the engine. He rapped on the window once. "You are making this so much worse." I looked at him through the glass. My husband, the father of my child, the man who had somehow convinced himself that kindness to another woman required cruelty to me. My phone vibrated in the cup holder. A motion alert from the nursery camera. I glanced down. The thumbnail showed Danielle standing in Iris's nursery, holding the wooden nameplate. I saved the clip to my camera roll. Then I backed out of the driveway. I drove 3 blocks before I had to pull over one. Not because I regretted leaving, and not because Gideon was right and I was being too emotional to drive. I pulled into a CVS parking lot because Iris had started to cry that sharp, panicked sound she made when hunger became an emergency. My hands were freezing, my chest was aching, and my milk was letting down at the sound of her cries, dampening the front of my shirt. I climbed into the back seat, locked the doors, and pulled her from her car seat. "It's okay," I whispered, even though absolutely nothing was okay. "I've got you." She latched on with greedy, desperate little gulps. I leaned my head back against the headrest and stared up at the gray fabric ceiling of the SUV. My phone kept vibrating in the cup holder up front. Gideon calling, Gideon calling, Gideon calling, then Constance calling, then Gideon again. I didn't answer. There are moments in a marriage when answering a call is the same as voluntarily stepping back into a cage. Instead, I opened the Nest app. The live feed showed the nursery from the angle of the top shelf. The gray crib, the pink rug. Danielle was kneeling by her suitcase, organizing folded baby clothes into Iris's dresser. Gideon stood by the door, one hand on his hip. The audio was crystal clear. "I didn't want her to leave," Danielle said. Gideon rubbed his face. "She does this. She shuts down. She's very sensitive right now. Postpartum depression is real, Danielle. Everything feels like a mountain to her." I froze. Iris was eating, small and warm against me, while my husband explained away my boundaries to another woman in my daughter's stolen nursery. Danielle lowered her voice. "Do you think she'll come back tonight?" "Of course she will," Gideon said. He didn't hesitate. "Where else is she going to go?" I stopped breathing for a second. Where else is she going to go? 7 words, spoken so casually, as if my entire life was a hallway with a single door. Danielle looked around the room. "I can move Silas's things to the guest room if she does. It's just, this room is so much safer." Gideon sighed. "No, the guest room is packed with boxes. It's fine. This is Iris's room. But for now, it's fine." I hit the save icon on the clip, even though the system was already archiving it. Iris's hand opened against my skin. Her tiny fingers splayed. I kissed her knuckles. "He thinks we're coming back tonight," I whispered to her. "Isn't that something?" She made a soft, milk-drunk sound and kept nursing. I called Audrey when Iris was finished. My older sister answered on the second ring. "Hey! How did the appointment go?" I tried to speak, but my throat closed up. "Sylvia?" "Audrey," I said, and my voice cracked on her name. "What happened?" I looked through the windshield at the sliding doors of the CVS. People were walking in for cough drops and prescriptions. The ordinary world was continuing without any shame. "Can I come over?" Audrey didn't ask why. It was the first act of uncomplicated kindness I had received all day, and it nearly broke me. "Get here now," she said. "Do you need me to meet you somewhere?" "No, I can drive." "Is Iris okay?" "She's fine. Are you?" I looked down at my damp shirt, my diaper bag, the car seat, and my phone still flashing with Gideon's name. "I'm leaving Gideon," I said. Audrey paused for half a second. "Drive carefully. I'll have the door open." My sister lived 20 minutes away in a small cedar-shingled townhouse, with yellow curtains and too many houseplants. When I pulled up, she was waiting on the porch, barefoot in an oversized sweatshirt, her arms crossed against the cold. Her face shifted when she saw me carrying Iris and the diaper bag. It wasn't shock or curiosity. It was a quiet, protective fury. I walked inside, greeted by the smell of coffee, clean laundry, and lemon cleanser. Audrey shut the door behind us and took the diaper bag off my shoulder. "He moved Danielle Ashford into the nursery," I said. Audrey's brows drew together. "Danielle from college? The one who sent him those texts before our wedding?" I had forgotten Audrey remembered that. "She has a baby," I said. "He put her baby's crib in Iris's nursery." Audrey froze, then asked very quietly, "He did what?" I told her everything. It was messy and disjointed. I stood in her entryway, with Iris fussing in my arms, and let out words like crib, nameplate, hallway, temporary, jealous. Audrey listened without interrupting. She only took Iris when I asked her to, then led me to the guest room and handed me a clean t-shirt. When I came out, Audrey was sitting on the sectional, Iris asleep on her chest. My daughter looked incredibly peaceful there, completely unaware that her father had evicted her from her own room. "I'm going to ask you something," Audrey said, her tone level. "Not because I doubt you, but because I need to know what kind of fire we're fighting." I sat down opposite her. "Is there any chance Danielle's baby is Gideon's?" The question hung heavy in the air. I hadn't let myself think about it during the drive. The thought had circled, dark and winged, but I hadn't given it a name. "I don't know," I said. "Danielle left the city 2 years ago," Audrey mused. "She came back last month. Gideon told you she was interviewing for jobs. He said she had a baby with some guy in Anchorage. And I believed him. I was recovering from childbirth, Audrey. I believed a lot of things because I didn't have the energy not to." Audrey nodded. No judgment. That made it both worse and better. My phone buzzed again. "Gideon? Come home. We need to talk." Then another. "Sylvia, you scared Danielle. There was no need for that." Then, "Iris needs stability. Stop dragging her around just to punish me." I read the texts out loud. Audrey's face went cold. He's already constructing his narrative. He started before you even left. Yeah. Good, she said. I blinked. Good? It means he'll keep talking. He'll put everything in writing. She was right. Audrey had worked as a paralegal for 8 years before opening her own accounting firm. She had seen more divorces than I had seen healthy marriages. Do not answer his calls, she said. Texts only, or email. Screenshot everything. Back up the Nest footage to a drive he can't access. Do you share passwords? Some of them. Change them, all of them. I need a lawyer. You need Eleanor Sterling. Eleanor had handled Audrey's commercial lease dispute 2 years ago. She was terrifying in the quietest way possible. I don't know if she does family law, I said. She does when there's real estate involved. Real estate. The word made me look out the window. The house. Gideon and I called it our house because marriage softens language, but the legal truth was precise. My grandmother had left me a trust fund, not a massive fortune, but enough for a significant down payment and a safety net. The house on Sycamore Terrace had been purchased using that trust fund before Gideon and I were married. He had moved in after the wedding. He had never liked talking about it. Whenever his mother, Constance, called it Gideon's house, I used to gently correct her. Then less gently. Eventually, Gideon asked me to stop embarrassing his mother. She's just old-fashioned, he had said. But language is never just language when property is involved. I opened my laptop on Audrey's kitchen table while Iris slept in a portable bassinet Audrey had borrowed from a neighbor. My hands had stopped shaking. The initial shock had passed, leaving behind something hard and sharp. I logged into our Nest account and changed the password. Then I downloaded every minute of video from that morning, 9:12 a.m. Gideon enters the nursery. He unscrews the Iris Rose nameplate from the door. He drags her crib out, scraping the side against the doorframe. 10 a.m. Danielle enters with Silas on her hip. She touches the Cloud Mobile. This is so sweet. Did Sylvia paint this? Gideon answers, yeah. She went a little overboard. Danielle laughs. I watched that part twice. Overboard. My love for my daughter reduced to an overreaction. 10:41 a.m. Gideon assembles Silas's crib under the clouds. 11:10 à 8 a.m. Danielle opens Iris's dresser. 11:19 a.m. Are you sure Sylvia won't mind? Danielle asks. Gideon answers, she'll mind, but she'll get over it. I clipped that exact phrase. She'll mind, but she'll get over it. Audrey stood behind me, holding a mug of tea. Send that to Eleanor. I haven't retained her yet. Send it anyway. I did. Eleanor Sterling called me 12 minutes later. Her voice was deep, clear, and utterly professional. Sylvia. Yes, I've reviewed the footage you sent. Are you and your daughter physically safe? The question caught in my throat. Yes. We're at my sister's. Good. Are you prepared to initiate legal separation proceedings? Yes. No hesitation. No tremor. The word was out before grief could dress itself as doubt. Eleanor continued. Do you have access to the deed, the trust documents, mortgage records, and your bank statements? I think so. Locate them tonight. Do not go back to the house alone. Do not speak to your husband on the phone, text, or email only. If he shows up at your sister's house, do not let him in. Audrey mouthed, I love her. Eleanor said, and one more thing. Do not threaten him with the camera footage yet. I wasn't going to. Excellent. Men like Gideon reveal more of themselves when they think you're merely hurt, not prepared. Men like Gideon. I looked over at Iris in the bassinet. Her tiny mouth was moving in her sleep. Can he take Iris from me? I asked, my voice dropping. Eleanor's tone softened by exactly 1 degree. Not after you left the home because another adult and child were moved into your infant's nursery without your consent. Document her care. Save every pediatric receipt. Keep a log. We will handle the rest. After we hung up, I sat very still. Audrey placed the tea in front of me. Drink. I took a sip. It tasted of ginger and honey. It tasted like the beginning of a long, cold road. At 8 p.m., Gideon texted again. Sylvia, this has gone way too far. Danielle feels sick to her stomach. I told her you aren't usually like this. I stared at the screen. Usually like this. I typed, deleted, and typed again. I will only communicate via text or email. Iris and I are safe. Do not come to Audrey's. His reply came within seconds. You took my daughter. I looked at Iris, then typed, I took our daughter out of a house where you gave her nursery to another woman's child without my consent. The 3 dots appeared, disappeared, and appeared again. It is 1 room, Sylvia. I took a screenshot, then sent one last text. Then you should have no problem staying in it. I put my phone face down for the first time all day. I cried then, not loud. Not the kind of crying Gideon could use to call me unstable. I cried with my hand over my mouth while Audrey rubbed my back. And Iris slept safely in a borrowed bassinet in a room that had never promised to be hers, but treated her with more respect than her own father had. At 11:42 p.m., my phone lit up again. This time, it wasn't Gideon. It was Danielle. The message was a photo. Silas was asleep in his gray crib under Iris's watercolor clouds. Beneath it, she wrote, Silas finally slept through the night in Iris's room. I hope one day you realize children are what matters most. I stared at the screen. A cold, flat calm washed over me. I saved the photo, then forwarded it to Eleanor. And at the end of the text, Danielle had made the one mistake she didn't realize she was making. She had called it Iris's room. By morning, Gideon's anger had shifted shapes. At midnight, he was insulted. At 2 a.m., he was wounded. By 6 a.m., he had become reasonable. The texts arrived in neat, emotional suits. Sylvia, I barely slept. This is killing me. I know you're hurting, but punishing me isn't going to help anyone. Danielle is looking for another place. Can we please keep lawyers out of this? Then, at 7:13 am, my debit card was declined at the grocery store. Did you do something to the account? I read it twice while Iris kicked her legs on Audrey's guest bed. Her little legs worked against her yellow sleep and play, a cartoon duck smiling on her tummy. She seemed entirely content. Your father has discovered cause and effect, I told her. She sneezed. Audrey leaned against the doorframe. Coffee? All of it, please. We spent the morning building a file. Eleanor had sent over a checklist that made grief look like a project manager's spreadsheet, turning betrayal into a series of dates and PDFs. Deed, trust records, joint account statements, credit card logs, tax returns, Iris's medical expenses. I used to think evidence was dramatic. A hidden letter, a lipstick smudge, a secret phone. But evidence, I realized, was mostly boring. It was spreadsheets and receipts. It was the exact date Gideon had paid for a hotel room near Danielle's old apartment using our joint credit card. It was a Target order that included Enfamil formula when Iris was exclusively breastfed. It was a charge for local moving services last Thursday, categorized as home maintenance. I stared at that moving receipt. Last Thursday, the exact day Gideon told me he had a late budget meeting at the school. I opened the Nest history from that afternoon. There he was. Gideon had entered the nursery at 5:14 p.m. while I was at my postpartum support group. He had a tape measure. He measured the wall beside the closet. He opened the drawers. He looked under the crib. He took photos on his phone. 2 days before he actually moved Danielle in. It wasn't an emergency. It wasn't a sudden flood. It was a plan. My hands went cold again, but this time, the coldness was useful. I saved the clip. Audrey looked over my shoulder. He was checking to see if 2 cribs would fit. Yeah. While I was at my support group, she let out a quiet, venomous curse. I emailed the clip to Eleanor along with the moving invoice. Eleanor replied, Excellent. Do not confront him. Let him explain this in writing later. At 10 a.m., I drove to Eleanor's office with Iris in the back seat and Audrey following in her car. Eleanor's office was downtown, all tinted glass and quiet elevators. Her office smelled faintly of old paper and peppermint. She was in her late 50s, her gray-streaked hair secured in a low bun, and her glasses made her look like someone who could see through solid walls. She greeted Iris first. Hello, Miss Iris, she said softly. I hear someone tried to steal your room. Iris stared at her with serious infant suspicion. Eleanor smiled. Good instincts. We sat around a walnut conference table. Audrey took Iris to the window to rock her so I could lay out the documents. Eleanor reviewed the deed. The property on Sycamore Terrace is held in a trust established by your grandmother's estate, with you as the sole beneficiary, she said. The purchase occurred prior to the marriage. Your husband signed a sole and separate property agreement at closing. I blinked. He did? Eleanor pulled a document from the stack and turned it toward me. Gideon's signature was there, sharp and hurried. I vaguely remembered that day. The closing had been long and tedious, filled with endless forms. Gideon had joked about signing away his right to be a kept man. I had laughed because I thought the joke was harmless. Eleanor tapped the signature. He acknowledged that this property is separate, non-marital trust asset. He has no claim to the house. He can attempt to argue contribution, but the trust structure is very clean. The relief was physical. My shoulders dropped for the first time in 24 hours. Then Eleanor opened the bank statements. This is more complicated. You have a joint checking account. Your freelance design income goes there, his salary goes there, and household expenses are paid from it. However, looking at the last 6 months, your deposits constitute roughly 78% of the total balance. I scaled back after Iris was born, I said, but I was still receiving royalty payments from my previous corporate branding projects. You also paid for the home insurance, the property taxes, the nursery renovations, and what is this recurring monthly transfer of $800? That's for Constance's supplemental health insurance, I said. My mother-in-law. Gideon said she was too proud to ask him directly. It was supposed to be temporary. Audrey let out a sharp sound that wasn't a laugh. Eleanor made a note. How temporary? It's been going on for 3 years. Since her knee replacement, I murmured, feeling a hot flush of shame creep up my neck. Sylvia, Audrey said gently, you don't have to defend that. But I wanted to. Part of me still wanted to explain that I wasn't stupid, just hopeful. That Constance had cried on the phone. That Gideon had called me generous. That I believed family meant taking care of each other. Eleanor didn't let me dwell on it. Generosity isn't a crime, she said. But entitlement is. We will separate the two. She moved to the credit card statements. The transactions told a story Gideon had written without realizing anyone would read it. Hotel near Danielle's apartment, $280. Baby boutique, $410. DoorDash to an address in North End, $85. CVS Pharmacy, $75. Movers, $300. Storage unit rental, $95 monthly. I stared at the storage unit fee. What storage unit? Eleanor highlighted it. We'll find out. My phone buzzed on the table. Gideon. Eleanor looked at it. May I? I nodded. She read the text out loud. Sylvia, I don't know what you did to the joint account, but this is childish. Danielle needs formula. Silas needs diapers. If you care about children as much as you claim, act like it. Audrey's jaw dropped. Eleanor's expression didn't change. Do you want to reply? Yes. What do you want to say? I took my phone. My fingers hovered over the screen. I wanted to say, buy them yourself. I wanted to say, you had money for movers when you were planning to steal my daughter's nursery. I wanted to say, how dare you ask me to feed the child of the woman sitting in my glider while our daughter sleeps in a borrowed bassinet? Eleanor watched me. I typed, I am no longer authorizing the use of my separate income for Danielle Ashford or her child. Expenses for Iris may be submitted in writing. Eleanor nodded. Perfect, Gideon replied within seconds. Your separate income? We are married, Sylvia. Eleanor held out her hand. I gave her the phone. She smiled slightly. He really does love to put things in writing. By 1 p.m., Eleanor had drafted 3 documents. A formal notice to Gideon that all communication must be conducted in writing through counsel. A demand letter to Danielle Ashford to immediately vacate the property on Sycamore Terrace, as she was an unauthorized occupant. A financial separation notice, informing Gideon that I was redirecting my direct deposits to a separate account and would only contribute to verified joint expenses for Iris. Is this going to make him angry? I asked. Eleanor capped her pen. Yes. I swallowed. Angry people make mistakes, she said. Managing his anger is no longer your job. Your job is to remain resolved. Resolved. I could do that. For Iris. After the meeting, Audrey drove us to the bank. Iris woke up in the lobby and started to fuss. I rocked her while a young personal banker named Cassandra helped me open a new, individual checking account and transfer my design deposits. A newborn? Cassandra asked, smiling at Iris. 3 months, I said. She's beautiful. Thank you. The simple kindness of a stranger felt almost too heavy to bear. While Cassandra was printing the paperwork, my phone buzzed again. Gideon was calling. I declined it. He texted, "You are humiliating me." I let out a soft laugh, quiet enough that Cassandra pretended not to hear. "You moved another woman's baby into our daughter's nursery while I was at the pediatrician," I wrote back. "I was helping an old friend," Gideon replied. "With my house, my money, and Iris's room, I sent." "Our house. Our money," he corrected. "Don't start rewriting history because you're mad." I took a slow breath, and then I did something I hadn't done in years. I stopped arguing with someone who had a vested interest in misunderstanding me. I didn't reply. Instead, I spent the afternoon forwarding screenshots to Eleanor. Gideon's card had been declined at Whole Foods. I knew because he sent me a photo of the card reader terminal, as if it were a indictment of my character. "Fix this now, Sylvia." Then, "Danielle is in tears. You are forcing me to choose between my wife and a helpless baby." I stared at that text. He thought it was a threat. He thought the terror of being the one who forced the choice would make me run back and save him from the consequences of his own actions. I typed, "You already chose, Gideon. I'm just respecting your choice." The 3 dots appeared, then disappeared. Silence for nearly an hour. Then Danielle texted, "Sylvia, I know you hate me, but Silas didn't ask for any of this. Gideon is just trying to do the right thing. Please don't punish him for his kindness." Kindness. The kind of kindness that required my silence. The kind of kindness that needed my credit card. The kind of kindness that had scraped my daughter's name off her door. I opened the Nest app. The live feed showed Danielle sitting in the glider. Gideon was standing in front of her, his face flushed. The audio picked up their voices clearly. "I thought you said she couldn't cut off the money," Danielle said, her voice sharper than she usually let Gideon hear. Gideon snapped, "I didn't think she would. The account is joint, but her trust deposits." He stopped, rubbing his temples. Danielle's tone went ice cold. "Gideon, I need to know what we're doing. Silas can't be in an unstable environment." "She'll calm down," Gideon insisted. "You keep saying that, but she's not calming down. She hired a lawyer." Danielle stood up, holding Silas. "Maybe she shouldn't. Maybe she needs to realize that if she walks away, she doesn't get to dictate terms." Gideon looked at her, his expression shifting. "What does that mean?" "It means maybe you need to talk to a lawyer, too." I saved the clip, then leaned my head against Audrey's sofa and closed my eyes. The nursery was no longer just a nursery, and for the first time, I saw the skeleton of the house Gideon had tried to build behind my back. Gideon lasted 36 hours without my income before he called me cruel. He chose the word carefully in a text sent at 4:12 a.m., likely after a night of Silas crying in a nursery that smelled of another woman's perfume. "What you are doing is cruel, Sylvia. You know Danielle has no support system here." I sat at Audrey's kitchen island, pumping milk while Iris slept. The pump made a rhythmic, mechanical hum, a sound that had become the metronome of my life. A sound Gideon had never tried to understand. On the counter in front of me were 2 columns of figures, Iris's expenses and everything else. Eleanor had told me to make the cut clean. Numbers make clean edges where emotions blur. Iris's expenses: pediatrician, copays, diapers, formula supplements, organic cotton clothes, the waitlist deposit for the daycare near my office. Everything else: Constance's supplemental Medicare premium, Gideon's Equinox membership, the meal kit delivery service he liked because cooking stressed him out, the house cleaning service, the streaming subscriptions, the lawn care, and every transaction related to Danielle. "Cruel," he had written. I looked at Iris's sleeping face in her borrowed bassinet. I typed, "I will cover verified await. Expenses for Iris. Send invoices via email." He replied, "This isn't about Iris. This is about you punishing me." He was partially right. Consequences always feel like punishment to people who have never had to pay for what they take. At 9 a.m., the cleaning service called my cell. "Sylvia," the manager asked, "we received your cancellation request for the Sycamore Terrace address." "Yes," I said. "I want to confirm that we are discontinuing the bi-weekly service." "Understood." Gideon was our on-site contact. "Should we notify him?" "No, I'll handle it." I hung up and removed Gideon's admin access from our smart home app. The app controlled more than he realized: the cleaning schedule, the Nest thermostat, the automated grocery delivery, the garage door code for the service providers. I had built our house like a machine that ran silently around him. He believed life was simple because he had never noticed the gears. I downgraded his status to guest on the lock codes, but left his access to the doors active for now. Eleanor had advised against lockouts without a court order, but everything else disappeared by noon. My phone lit up like a switchboard. Why did the cleaning service say they were canceled? The grocery delivery didn't arrive. The thermostat app says I don't have permission to change the temp. Sylvia, this is insane. Then, Danielle is freezing. To that, I replied, Danielle is an unauthorized occupant in my home. Her comfort is not my responsibility. Stop calling it your home, he snapped back. Like I'm some kind of stranger. You signed a sole and separate property agreement before we married, Gideon. He didn't reply for 12 minutes. Then, so that's what this is really about. Money. I stared at the phone, almost impressed by the sheer audacity of it. He had moved another woman into my daughter's nursery, spent my income on her, asked me to feed her child, and now I was the one making it about money. Audrey looked over from the stove where she was chopping apples. What did he say? I showed her. She snorted. Men discover property law and call it betrayal. At 1:30 p.m., Gideon tried a different tactic. He sent a photo of Iris's bassinet returned to the nursery, sitting next to Silas's crib. See? I fixed it. Come home and we can talk. I zoomed in on the photo. My daughter's bassinet had been shoved into the corner by the closet, underneath the lowest shelf, half hidden by the open door. Silas's crib remained directly under the watercolor clouds. Fixed. He had given my daughter a corner in her own room. I saved the photo, then opened the Nest feed. Danielle was standing by the dresser, folding onesies. Gideon was by the window. This looks ridiculous, Danielle said. Gideon sighed. It's temporary. She'll take it as an insult. She's taking everything as an insult right now. Danielle let out a soft laugh. Maybe because it is. Gideon turned. Don't start. No, seriously, Gideon. You shoved her baby in a corner and sent her a photo. That's your peace offering? What do you want me to do? Danielle's voice shifted, dropping into that soft, sharp register. I want you to stop acting like she's the only mother in the world. Silas needs stability too. I'm tired of being treated like a secret you're keeping until she calms down. You aren't a secret. Then prove it. How? Make this house work for both kids. Gideon let out a heavy breath. Danielle, you know what the agreement was. I sat up straight. The agreement. It wasn't an impulse. It wasn't a sudden flood. You said you'd help me until I got on my feet, Danielle said. But you also said Sylvia was too distracted by the baby to notice half of what goes on. You said there was plenty of room. I stopped breathing. Audrey saw my face. Sylvia? I raised a finger, listening. Gideon said, I didn't mean it like that. Danielle laughed, a short, bitter sound. You said she had her sister, her trust fund, her perfect little safety net. You said I had no one. My trust fund. My safety net. He had discussed my grandmother's legacy with Danielle. He had used my financial security as a justification for why I could be displaced. I saved the clip twice, then emailed it to Eleanor. Her reply came 5 minutes later. This is significant. Do not engage. Let him keep digging. But Gideon was about to do more than just dig. At 3:15 p.m., he went to the grocery store with Danielle and Silas. I knew because he texted me from the checkout lane. My card is still declined. I'm trying to buy groceries. Use your own account, I replied. There's nothing in it. The mortgage payment is coming up. The mortgage is paid automatically from the trust management account, I wrote. It doesn't touch your personal account. A long pause. That's not the point, Sylvia. Of course it wasn't. Facts never were. When they stopped serving him, he sent another text. I can't believe you are humiliating me in public. 10 minutes later, Danielle texted, I had to put the formula back. I hope you're proud of yourself. For a second, the old instinct of guilt flared up. A hungry baby is a powerful image. They knew that. Then I logged into my bank app and checked the transaction alerts for the joint card I had frozen. Danielle had tried to charge $312 at Whole Foods. The items included a $75 luxury candle, a bottle of facial serum, 2 bottles of Cabernet, and a monogrammed baby blanket for Silas. I took a screenshot of the declined authorization list and sent it to Eleanor. Then I replied to Danielle the first and only time I would write to her directly. Tell Gideon to send the receipt for Silas's formula to Silas's father. She didn't reply. At 5 p.m., Constance called. I didn't answer. She left a voicemail, her voice tight and theatrical. Sylvia, I don't know what has gotten into you, but Gideon is beside himself. You have a daughter now. You cannot act like a jealous teenager every time your husband shows some basic human compassion. Danielle is a young mother, and her baby is innocent. Come to Sunday dinner. We will sit down as a family and discuss how to repair the damage you've caused. The damage I've caused. I saved the voicemail. Audrey listened to it, her mouth pressed into a thin line. Sunday dinner, she said. I'll go with you. No, I said. I'm going alone. Sylvia, I need to get them in one room, Audrey. I need them to say it out loud. Audrey looked at me, and then a slow understanding dawned on her face. You're going to record it. I'm going to let them speak. She smiled, a small, humorless curve of her lips. That family does love the sound of their own righteousness. The first real consequence for Gideon came that evening, and it didn't come from me. It came from Danielle. The Nest camera only caught part of it because they were in the hallway, but the audio was sharp. Silas was crying loudly. I can't do this if she's going to freeze everything, Danielle said. I told you I'd handle it, Gideon snapped. You keep saying that. I'll handle it. Gideon, the house is hers. Silence. It's complicated, Gideon said. No, it sounds simple. She owns it, she pays for it, and we're living on her charity. I pay for things. Like what? Her voice rose. Don't raise your voice at me. Danielle laughed. You talked like you were the king of this castle. You talked like it was your house. It is my house. Is it? Silas is crying. Gideon, go get his bottle. Keep your voice down, Gideon hissed. Why? So your little camera doesn't hear? I froze. A pause. Gideon's footsteps entered the nursery. His face appeared close to the Nest camera on the top shelf. He stared directly at the lens. He realized. The feed went black. I stared at the screen. Audrey walked over. What happened? He turned it off. My phone rang instantly. Gideon. I let it ring. Then a text. You were spying on us. I picked up Iris, who had started to fuss, and held her against my chest. I typed, I had a baby monitor in my daughter's nursery. You knew it was there, Gideon. You were recording private conversations, he wrote. You were having them in Iris's room, I replied. This is illegal, he sent. I forwarded the exchange to Eleanor. Her reply was immediate. Do not argue law with him. Tell him all communications go through me. So I did. Speak to my attorney. Sylvia, you don't need a lawyer against your own husband, he sent. I now. The typing indicator appeared and disappeared for a full minute. Then, you are going to destroy our family over a crib? I looked down at Iris. Her eyes were open, dark, and unfocused, staring up at me as if I were the entire ceiling of her world. No, I whispered. Then typed it out. I am protecting my family from what you did to that crib. Constance had set a beautiful table, the way she did when she wanted to dominate. White linen, silver napkin rings, lit candles even though it was only 5 p.m. A prime rib roast sat in the center, flanked by roasted fingerling potatoes, an artisanal salad, and 2 bottles of Cabernet breathing near crystal glasses. It looked like hospitality. It was an ambush with fine china. I arrived without Iris. It was my first act of defiance. Gideon opened the door before I could knock. He looked exhausted. He had that crumpled, self-pitying look men wear when they want to be thanked for the suffering they've caused. His shirt was wrinkled, and there were dark circles under his eyes. For a fraction of a second, memory tried to soften him. I remembered him holding Iris at 2 a.m., humming some nonsense song because he didn't know any lullabies. I remembered his hand on my back during labor, his voice saying, You're doing so well, Syl. And then I remembered him taking our daughter's name off her door. His eyes flicked behind me. Where's Iris? With Audrey. His mouth tightened. You should have brought her. No. My family wants to see her. Your family can ask when I'm not being summoned for an intervention. Sylvia, he whispered, please don't start. I walked past him into Constance's dining room. Constance was standing by the sideboard in pearls and a navy silk blouse, looking like a judge who had already decided on the sentence. Gideon's younger brother, Tristan, was there with his wife, Fiona. Aunt Beverly was also at the table, though she wasn't a real aunt, just Constance's oldest friend and favorite echo. Danielle was sitting at the far end of the table. She had brought Silas. Of course she had. He was in a portable high chair clipped to one of Constance's dining chairs, chewing on a silicone ring. Danielle was wearing a cream sweater, soft makeup, and the brave face expression of a woman entering enemy territory. She looked at me, then lowered her eyes as if my presence was a physical blow. Constance opened her arms for a hug. I didn't step into them. "Sylvia," she said, her arms dropping smoothly. "I'm glad you came. I'm here to listen," I said. Aunt Beverly muttered, "That would be a nice change." Gideon shot her a look, but it wasn't particularly stern. I sat at the foot of the table, far from Gideon. The chair was cold. I laid my phone face down next to my water glass. The recording app was already running. Eleanor had told me that in our state, one-party consent applied. Keep your voice level. Ask clear questions. Let them answer. So I folded my hands and waited. Constance began before the soup was even cleared. "I think everyone at this table loves Iris," she said, her voice dripping with maternal authority. "Then everyone at this table should understand why evicting her from her nursery was unacceptable," I said. Gideon let out a sharp breath. "Nobody evicted her." I looked at him. "Her bassinet was moved to the hallway," I said. "Her crib was moved to the guest room. Her name was taken off the door." Tristan shifted uncomfortably. Fiona looked down at her plate. Constance's smile remained tight. "Names can be put back, Sylvia. Furniture can be rearranged. But compassion is not something you pack away when it's inconvenient." I let the silence stretch, then asked, "Inconvenient for whom?" Danielle's eyes flicked up. Constance said, "Danielle had an emergency." "What emergency?" "Her apartment flooded," Gideon said. I turned to him. "When did it flood?" "I don't know." "Tuesday." "Danielle?" I looked at her. She looked startled. "What? What day did your apartment flood?" Her fingers tightened around her water glass. "Wednesday night." Gideon looked at her. Constance intervened. "Does the day really matter?" "Yes," Fiona murmured, speaking for the first time. Everyone looked at her. Fiona was usually quiet, but she had a sharp mind. "It matters if we're calling it an emergency." Constance's eyes flared. "Fiona, please." Aunt Beverly scoffed. "Only if you're looking to put a young mother on trial." I smiled slightly. An interesting choice of words. The main course was served. No one ate. Constance tried again. "Sylvia, you have always been sensitive. That's not a criticism. Motherhood heightens everything. But Gideon tells me you made a dramatic exit, took the baby, froze the joint accounts, and hired a lawyer before anyone had a chance to explain." "Gideon had a chance to explain," I said. "He told me it was just a room." Tristan winced. Gideon leaned forward. "I was trying to keep you calm. You were making a mountain out of a molehill. It was a mountain." Danielle spoke, her voice barely a whisper. "I offered to leave." I turned to her. "When?" She blinked. "The day you came home. You were sitting in my daughter's glider," I said. "Your baby's clothes were in her dresser." Her cheeks flushed. Gideon said, "Sylvia." "No," I said. She said she offered to leave. "I'm asking when." "Before or after she arranged Silas's things in Iris's room?" Fiona looked up quickly. Constance's expression hardened. "You went through the drawers?" "It's my daughter's dresser." "It was temporary," Danielle whispered. I looked at her. "You sent me a photo of your son sleeping in Iris's nursery." Gideon's head turned toward her. Danielle's mouth opened slightly. I continued, I said, "You wrote that children are what matters most. Was that meant to keep me calm?" She looked down. No answer. Aunt Beverly chimed in. "Perhaps she was trying to remind you that there are 2 innocent babies involved here." "No," I said. "There is one innocent baby at the center of my marriage. My daughter. Silas is innocent, but he is not my child. And he has no right to my daughter's nursery." Silence settled over the table. Tristan's chair scraped. "What is that supposed to mean?" I met Gideon's eyes. "Is Silas your son, Gideon?" Danielle let out a soft gasp. Constance gasped. "Sylvia!" Gideon stood up. "You do not have the right to say things like that. I have the right to ask why my husband is housing another woman and her child in my house." "Our house," he corrected, his voice rising. "My house." The word landed. Tristan looked at Gideon. Fiona looked at Constance. Aunt Beverly stared at me as if I had slapped her. Gideon's face was red. "Do not do this here. You invited me here. Constance's voice dropped into a low, dangerous tone. Sylvia, are you trying to humiliate yourself? No, Fiona said quietly. Everyone looked at her. She looked uncomfortable, but she didn't back down. Actually, she isn't. If Tristan moved some other woman's baby into our son's nursery, I would have burned the house down. Tristan muttered. Fiona, please. She turned to him. Am I wrong? He opened his mouth, then closed it. Constance's face went rigid. This is not helpful. It's honest, Fiona said. For the first time that evening, something in the room shifted. Not enough to save anyone, but enough for them to realize I wasn't the only woman who saw what had happened. Gideon slowly sat back down. Constance pushed her untouched plate away. Sylvia, what do you want? The question was meant to sound magnanimous. It sounded exhausted. I want Danielle and Silas out of my house, I said. I want Gideon to communicate with me only through Eleanor. I want the money he spent on Danielle from our joint account documented and reimbursed. I want a temporary custody schedule, and I want a divorce. Danielle's head snapped up. Gideon froze. Constance stared at me. Do not say absurd things. You have a baby. I know, I said. That's why I'm leaving. Gideon's voice was low. You are not divorcing me. The room changed again. There it was. Not grief, not fear, ownership. I looked at him. I am. Because you decided to sacrifice our daughter's space for Danielle's comfort, and then called me jealous for objecting. You keep saying our daughter as if I don't love Iris. Love that costs you nothing is cheap, Gideon. It's easy. His jaw clenched. Constance tapped her fingers on the table. Enough, Sylvia. You have benefited from this family too. I turned to her. How? How? Her mouth opened. No words came. Aunt Beverly said, Constance has treated you like a daughter. I looked at Constance. The daughter whose trust income pays for your supplemental Medicare and physical therapy? This time, the silence was absolute. Gideon's face went white. Constance whispered, Gideon, you said. I looked at him. You didn't tell her. Constance's hands shook in her lap. Fiona was staring at me, then at Gideon. Tristan looked furious, but not at me, Gideon said. This isn't the time. It's been 3 years, I said. I paid because you told me your mother was too embarrassed to ask. I paid because I thought we were family. But as of yesterday, I stopped. Constance looked as if her chair had vanished beneath her. You stopped? Yes. You can't just stop, she whispered. I can. Gideon leaned across the table. Sylvia, don't bring my mother into this. She brought me here. Constance's eyes filled with tears, but I no longer believed in tears that only appeared when the bills were mentioned. Danielle stood up suddenly, lifting Silas from his high chair. I should leave. No one stopped her. But before she left the dining room, she looked at Gideon. Not with love, with expectation. Like a woman watching her investment falter. I saw it. Gideon saw it too. His jaw tightened. My phone kept recording. Constance's voice shook. I cannot believe you are using money like this. I learned from the best, I said. Then I stood up. Gideon stood too. Sylvia, wait. I waited through my entire pregnancy, Gideon. I waited through my recovery. I waited while you made decisions in my house and expected me to call them charity. I'm done waiting. He followed me into the foyer. Behind us, Constance was weeping quietly. Tristan was speaking in a low, angry voice. Beverly was whispering. The elegant dinner had collapsed into a heap of dirty dishes and exposed secrets. Gideon grabbed my wrist near the front door. Not hard enough to bruise, but hard enough to remind me that he still believed he could stop me. I looked down at his hand. Let go. Sylvia, he said, his voice cracking because the consequences had finally touched something he valued. Please, we can fix this. I looked at him for a long moment. Which part? All of it. Can you put Iris's name back on the door? Yes. Can you move Silas's crib? Yes. Can you tell Danielle to leave? His silence answered before his mouth could. I nodded. I didn't think so. He closed his eyes. She has nowhere to go. And now, neither do you, I said, if you keep choosing my house for her. I opened the door and walked out. As I walked to my car, my phone buzzed. A text from Eleanor. I forwarded the audio file through the secure portal first. Eleanor. Good. Very good. Come in tomorrow. The family pressure just became financial coercion. I got into the driver's seat and let out a long breath. For the first time since I had seen Silas's crib, Gideon had lost something in front of people. Not everything not yet, but his version of the story had cracked at that dinner table. And when a beautiful table setting cracks, everyone starts to notice the rot underneath. On Tuesday morning, I drove back to Sycamore Terrace. Audrey was in the passenger seat, Eleanor was on speakerphone, and Iris was asleep in the back. We weren't going inside. Not yet. Eleanor had been very clear. You can visit the property, but avoid unnecessary conflict. Let Danielle stay for now. We gather facts, then we execute. So, I parked across the street from the house I had once thought I would grow old in. From the curb, it looked exactly the same. The white siding, the blue door, the 2 flower beds I had planted with lavender before Iris was born. The maple tree in the front yard was bare now, save for a few stubborn leaves. Iris's nursery window on the 2nd floor faced the street. The curtains were half open. The blush pink curtains. My curtains. Behind them, I saw a shadow move. Audrey touched my hand. Breathe. I am. You're holding your breath, Sil. I let it out. The Nest camera had been offline since Friday. Gideon had realized it was recording audio and pulled the plug. It was his first attempt to regain control. Eleanor called it behavior bordering on the destruction of evidence. Audrey called it stupid. I called it predictable. But the cameras weren't the only witnesses in the neighborhood. Mrs. Gable lived next door in a brick colonial with green shutters and a porch lined with concrete birds. She was 78, had sharp eyes, and was more observant than any Ring doorbell. I had brought her a peach cobbler when we moved in. She had brought me homemade chicken soup after Iris was born. Gideon found her intrusive. Intrusive is another word for helpful when men do things in daylight and assume no one is watching. Mrs. Gable opened her door before I even stepped onto her porch. Sylvia, she said, her eyes instantly moving to Iris's car seat. Oh, sweetheart, the tenderness in her voice nearly broke my composure. Hi, Mrs. Gable. Do you have a few minutes? She looked past me at Audrey, then across the lawn to my house. Her mouth tightened. Come inside. Her living room smelled of black tea and old books. A small terrier named Barnaby barked once, decided Iris was uninteresting, and went back to his cushion. Mrs. Gable led us into the kitchen. I was wondering when you'd come back, she said as she poured water. Audrey and I exchanged a look. I sat down carefully, keeping the car seat near my feet. What did you see, Mrs. Gable? The older woman's hands clasped her mug, the blue veins prominent under her paper-thin skin. That woman started coming around before you went to the hospital. My stomach contracted. How long before? At least a month. She frowned out the window. Maybe more. I saw her car in the driveway on a Friday afternoon. Gideon was carrying boxes from her trunk. I assumed she was a colleague. Audrey leaned forward. Did she stay the night? Mrs. Gable hesitated. Eleanor's voice came from the phone. It's all right, Mrs. Gable. This is Eleanor Sterling, Sylvia's attorney. You aren't obligated to answer anything that makes you uncomfortable. But if you witnessed activities related to the unauthorized occupancy of Sylvia's home, your statement will help protect her and her baby. Mrs. Gable nodded, as if Eleanor could see her. She was there late, she said. I don't know about overnight, but while Sylvia was in the hospital? Yes, I closed my eyes. I had been in the hospital for 5 days after Iris's birth because my blood pressure had spiked and Iris had latch issues. Gideon had gone home twice to shower and check on the house. Apparently, he was checking on it with Danielle. Mrs. Gable continued, her voice softer. I saw her at the door one evening with a car seat. Gideon let her in. It was raining. She looked upset. What day? Eleanor asked. Mrs. Gable stood up and walked to a drawer. She pulled out a small desk calendar, filled with neat, handwritten notes. I write everything down, she said defensively. Garbage day, doctor visits, unfamiliar cars. My daughter says I watch too much Law and Order. Audrey smiled. Your daughter is wrong. Mrs. Gable flipped the pages. Here, March 9th. Blue sedan in Gideon's driveway. Overnight, rain, baby carrier. March 9th. I was in the hospital on March 9th. Iris was under the Billy Rubin lights that night. I had cried because I couldn't hold her except during feedings. Gideon had kissed my forehead at 7 p.m. and said he needed a proper night's sleep in our bed. Do you have a security camera on your garage? Audrey asked. Mrs. Gable pursed her lips. I do. The app saves the clips for 30 days. My skin prickled. Why 30 days? I haven't deleted them, Mrs. Gable said, looking at me. I don't want any trouble with Gideon, Sylvia. Why would there be trouble? Eleanor asked. Mrs. Gable looked at her tea. My grandson Leo works at Wellington Prep. Gideon helped him get his foot in the door with the admissions department. Gideon has influence there. Gideon was the director of admissions at Wellington Prep, not a teacher, but close enough to the board and the donors to be treated with deferential respect by staff. What did he say to you? I asked. Mrs. Gable's eyes met mine. Last week after you left, he came over. Asked if I'd seen you. I said no. He said you were having a very difficult postpartum transition, and he hoped the neighbors wouldn't feed into the drama. She swallowed. Then he mentioned Leo. Said he was doing so well at Wellington, and it would be a shame if local gossip made things uncomfortable for him. Audrey whispered, That absolute bastard. Eleanor's voice was sharp. Mrs. Gable, did you perceive that as a threat to your grandson's employment? Mrs. Gable's hand shook slightly. Yes. I felt a cold rage settle into my bones. Gideon hadn't just moved Danielle in. He had started building a fortress of lies around the truth, using every bit of leverage he had to silence anyone who could expose him. I'm so sorry, Mrs. Gable, I said. She looked up quickly. Don't you dare apologize, Sylvia. Gideon had no right to bring Leo into this. The kitchen was quiet, save for Barnaby's soft snoring. Then Mrs. Gable stood up. I'll get the iPad. She returned with a tablet, and we watched the footage together. March 9th, 8:42 p.m. Rain streaking the lens. Gideon's car in the driveway. The blue sedan parked behind it. Danielle walking up to the porch, carrying a car seat covered with a blanket. Gideon opening the door before she even knocks. He takes the car seat from her. He puts a hand on her lower back and guides her inside. I didn't know a heart could break again after it was already shattered. Apparently, it just finds new chambers to collapse into. Eleanor asked Mrs. Gable to email the files. She agreed. Another clip. March 13th, 9 a.m. Gideon carrying 2 boxes from Danielle's car. I was still in the hospital. March 21st. Danielle entering with a garment bag. April 2nd. Gideon and Danielle on the porch, standing close while Silas sleeps in the stroller. April 12th. A delivery truck dropping off a crib box. This was before the flood, before the emergency, before the temporary solution. Mrs. Gable's evidence didn't whisper. It shouted. Iris woke up and began to cry. I pulled her from the car seat, holding her against my collarbone, breathing in her scent of milk and sweet sleep. Mrs. Gable watched us, her eyes damp. He told everyone you were fragile, she said. But you look like a mother to me. That simple acknowledgement almost cost me my restraint. Not Gideon's cruelty, but being seen so clearly. Thank you, I said. When we left Mrs. Gable's house, Gideon's car wasn't in the driveway, but Danielle's blue sedan was. Audrey insisted on walking me to my porch to get the mail. Eleanor remained on speaker. The mailbox was stuffed bills, catalogs, pediatric appointment reminders, and a white envelope addressed to Gideon in Danielle's neat handwriting. Then the front door opened. Danielle stood there, barefoot, wearing another one of Gideon's shirts. Technically my shirt, I had bought it for him. Her eyes widened, then narrowed. Sylvia. She looked at Audrey, then at the phone in my hand. Is that your lawyer? Eleanor answered clearly. Yes, Miss Ashford. Danielle's face hardened. I held up the mail. I'm taking this. You can't just show up here whenever you want, Danielle said. Audrey laughed. In her own house? Danielle ignored her, looking at me. Gideon said all communication goes through the attorneys. Eleanor's voice was smooth. Miss Ashford, Gideon does not own this property. You have been served with a notice of unauthorized occupancy. A formal eviction date will be provided. Danielle's mouth tightened. I have a baby. So does Sylvia, Audrey said. Danielle's eyes flashed. I know how this works. You think you're better than me because your grandmother left you a trust fund. I stared at her. There it was the resentment Gideon had fed. The story they had told each other to make their theft feel like justice. No, I said. I think I'm the owner because my name is on the deed. Her face went red. You have everything, she spat. You have a family, money, a perfect little girl. Gideon only felt sorry for me because he actually has a heart. I looked up at the second-floor window. The blush pink curtains fluttered slightly from the HVAC system. And his heart told him to move your boxes in while I was in the hospital? Danielle froze. Audrey's posture shifted beside me. Eleanor said nothing, which somehow made the silence even sharper. Danielle swallowed. He told you. No, I said. You just did. The blood drained from her face. The front door opened wider behind her, and I caught a glimpse of my entryway. Silas's toy basket sat next to the console table where our wedding photo used to be. My framed photo of Gideon holding Iris was gone. Danielle moved to block my view. Gideon will never forgive you for this, she whispered. The comment almost made me smile. Do you still think I'm trying to earn his forgiveness? I turned and walked down the steps. Audrey followed. Danielle yelled after us. You walked away from him. I stopped at the gate, then looked back. No, I said. I walked away with my daughter before you could teach her that love means giving up your room. Danielle slammed the door. By the time we got back to Audrey's car, Eleanor had already texted. Her statement confirms the pre-existing occupancy. I'm drafting the emergency motion for exclusive use. Audrey buckled Iris's car seat with trembling hands. She knew, she whispered. She knew you were in the hospital. Yes. Gideon brought her into your home while you were recovering from a C-section. Yes. Audrey looked at me. Please tell me you're angry. I looked back at the house on Sycamore Terrace. For years, I had poured myself into it: paint, curtains, organization, mortgage contributions, food, comfort. I had made it a home because I believed that's what love did. But a home that could be gifted to another woman while I was still healing was not a home. It was just a building with a roof. I'm not angry enough to be careless, I said. Audrey nodded slowly. My phone buzzed. Gideon, were you at the house? Then, Danielle is hysterical. Then, stay away until we resolve this. I looked at Iris's nursery window one last time, then typed, we will resolve this in court. Danielle called me from Gideon's phone 2 nights later. I knew it was her before I even answered, because Gideon never used FaceTime unless he was trying to look earnest. Danielle used it when she wanted a witness. I was in Audrey's guest room, folding Iris's laundry into a borrowed dresser. Iris was on her back on the bed, kicking her legs with serious determination at a soft cloth book. Her cheeks had rounded out over the past week. She no longer looked like a fragile newborn, but rather like a person deciding if the world was worthy of her trust. Gideon's name flashed on the screen. Audrey, sitting cross-legged on the floor with a stack of bank statements, looked up. Don't answer. I want to see what they want, I said. I'm going to record the screen. Audrey sighed. I hate how good you've gotten at this. So do I. I started the screen recording and answered. Danielle's face filled the screen. She was in Iris's nursery. Of course she was. She was sitting in my glider, angled so I could see Silas's gray crib behind her and the watercolor clouds above it. Iris's bassinet was no longer in sight. The pink curtains had been tied back with a rough cord. On the wall, the 2 faint squares where Iris's nameplate had been were visible 2 pale scars on the cream paint. Danielle gave a sad, tremulous smile. Hi, Sylvia. Where is Gideon? Downstairs. He said I could call. I wanted to talk mother to mother. Audrey mouthed, oh please. I leaned the phone against a pillow and took Iris onto my lap. Go ahead, I said. Danielle's smile faltered at my lack of warmth. I know things have gotten really ugly, she said. And I know you think I'm trying to take something from you. You were sitting in my daughter's glider, in my daughter's nursery, with your baby's crib behind you. Her eyes flicked off camera, then back. That's exactly what I mean. You're making this about property. Children don't understand property, Sylvia. No, but adults do. She let out a slow, dramatic sigh, as if she were exercising great patience with my hysteria. Silas hasn't had stability since the day he was born. His father walked away. Our apartment wasn't safe. Gideon was the only person who reached out. Gideon is married. I know. Gideon has a daughter. I know that too. Then why are you calling me? Her expression shifted for a fraction of a second. The sorrow thinned, and something cold and calculating slid through. Because you're making this much harder than it needs to be. Audrey's eyebrows rose. I kept my voice flat. And how easy should it be? Danielle leaned closer to her screen. You have Audrey. You have your grandmother's trust. You have a house, money, a safety net. I have Silas. And you have a car, designer luggage, and enough nerve to unpack your things in another woman's nursery. Her cheeks burned. You don't know what I've been through. You're right, I don't. But I know what you're doing. Silas made a sound behind her. She turned, lifted him from the crib, and sat back down, holding him facing the camera like an exhibit. Look at him, she said. He's just a baby. I looked. He was a baby, innocent, soft, chewing on his fist, completely unaware that his mother was using his face as a shield. I know, I said, which is why you should stop using him to justify hurting another baby. Danielle's eyes went sharp. Iris isn't hurt. She's with you. She's not in her home because you're in her room. She's 3 months old, Sylvia. She doesn't know the difference. The words hit me like a splash of ice water. Audrey whispered, "Oh my God." I leaned closer to the phone. Say that again. Danielle seemed to realize she had crossed a line. I mean, she's too young to understand whose room it is, but not too young to be displaced. I didn't displace her. Gideon made a choice. There it was. I let the silence hang, then asked, "What choice did Gideon make?" Danielle hesitated, rocking Silas, suddenly very cautious. He chose to help us by giving us the room. He said it was a waste of space, while Iris was sleeping in your room anyway. My hand tightened on Iris's blanket. He said that. Danielle's mouth curved. He said you were obsessed with this room because you needed something to control. He said once you adjusted to motherhood, you'd realize a baby doesn't need a showroom. Audrey's face was white with fury. I looked down at Iris. She was sucking on her fingers, entirely peaceful. Did Gideon tell you to take her name off the door? I asked. Danielle looked away. He took it down. Gideon unscrewed the sign, I said. But you were the one holding it. Her eyes snapped back. How do you know that? I smiled, and it wasn't a kind smile. Danielle froze. You forgot about the camera, I said. For a second, she didn't understand. Then her gaze traveled upward, past her phone to the ceiling. The visible Nest camera was offline. Gideon had unplugged it, but he didn't know about the secondary backup camera built into the Nest Protect smoke detector, a system I had installed myself after the primary camera kept dropping its Wi-Fi signal during Iris's first week home. I hadn't mentioned it to Gideon because he never asked how the security system worked, and I hadn't mentioned it to Eleanor until the visible feed went dark. The color drained from Danielle's face. You're recording me. I'm recording my daughter's room. You're sick. You're violating my privacy. She stood up so quickly the phone tilted. Silas began to cry. From off-camera, Gideon's voice barked, Danielle? What's going on? The phone spun wildly, then Gideon's face appeared. Sylvia, he snarled. What did you say to her? Ask her what she said to me. Danielle's voice came from behind him, sharp with panic. She has another camera, Gideon. She's recording. Gideon froze. His eyes traveled to the ceiling. I could see him calculating the primary camera unplugged, the secondary camera active. The conversations recorded. Danielle's admissions saved. His own admissions saved. For the first time, I saw real fear on his face. Sylvia, he said, his voice dropping. Turn it off. No. This is my private life. You're living it in my house with another woman. He winced. Danielle's voice rose behind him. You said she couldn't do this, Gideon. You said she wouldn't fight. Gideon turned away from the phone. Not now, Danielle. No, she yelled. You said she was too tired. You said once she saw that everyone thought she was overreacting, she'd fall in line. Gideon's face changed. Mine did too. Audrey put her hand over her mouth. The phone was still recording. Danielle, shut up, Gideon hissed. Danielle let out a sharp, ugly laugh. Why? Because she knows you planned it now? She already knows. Your perfect wife isn't as stupid as you thought. Gideon grabbed the phone. Enough, he said. No, I said. Let her finish. Gideon's eyes burned into the camera. Are you enjoying this? No, I said. I'm documenting it. He looked as if he hated me in that moment. Perhaps he did. People often hate the mirror that reflects them clearly. Danielle is emotional, he said. You provoked her. She called me Gideon because you refused to communicate like a civilized person. So you're building a case. Yes. The honesty stunned him more than any insult could have. I adjusted Iris against my chest and looked at my husband through the screen. You moved another woman's baby into our daughter's nursery. You told her mother I'd get over it. You let your family call me unstable. You spent my money and offered up my house as if it were yours to give. Did you really think I wouldn't build a case? His mouth opened, but nothing came out. Danielle began to sob in the background, but the sound was angry, not broken. Audrey was crying too, silent tears rolling down her cheeks. Gideon looked back at them cornered, exposed, and utterly small. Choose, Danielle's voice whispered from off camera. The phone picked it up. Gideon closed his eyes. I felt incredibly calm. This was the exact scene he had tried to avoid from the very beginning. Not a choice between compassion and cruelty. Not a choice between two babies. It was a choice between the truth and the lie that allowed him to keep both women on the leash of his ego. He opened his eyes. Sylvia, I need time. Time. Not me. Not Iris. Not even Danielle. Just more time to avoid the invoice. I nodded. Eleanor will be in touch. I ended the call. The guest room was silent, save for Iris's soft breathing. Audrey stared at me. We got all of that. Yes. You have a secondary camera? Since Iris was 2 weeks old, the primary one kept dropping. I got a backup. Audrey looked down at Iris. Your postpartum anxiety might have just saved your daughter's future. Iris hiccuped. I uploaded the screen recording and the Nest Protect clip to Eleanor's secure folder. Her text arrived 15 minutes later. This changes the timeline. We file the emergency order tomorrow morning. I stared at the words. Tomorrow morning. Not someday. Not when you calm down. At 11:15 p.m., Gideon texted, Danielle is leaving for a few days. Can we please talk privately now? A week ago, that text would have made me feel something. Privately meant intimacy. Privately meant the husband behind the curtain. Privately meant maybe we could find each other when no one was looking. Now, privately just meant without witnesses. I replied, No. He sent, I miss my daughter. I looked at that text for a long time. Then I wrote, You will receive the proposed custody schedule from Eleanor. I miss my wife too, he wrote. My thumb hovered over the screen. Was there grief? Yes, the deep, heavy grief that doesn't disappear just because you're right. I missed the husband I thought I had. I missed the man who had held ice to my forehead during labor. I missed the voice that promised our daughter she would always have a safe space. But missing a person doesn't make them real. Sometimes, it just proves they've been gone longer than you realized. I turned off my phone. A few minutes later, Iris woke up to nurse. I held her in the dim room, listening to Audrey's old house creak in the wind. You still have a safe space, Iris, I whispered to her. And this time, it doesn't depend on him. Gideon chose a coffee shop with glass walls. It was his first mistake. He thought a public space meant safety. He thought I'd be less likely to say the words divorce, affair, unauthorized occupant, or my daughter's nursery if strangers were close enough to hear. He forgot that I no longer cared about protecting his reputation from the truth. Audrey parked across the street. Iris was asleep in her seat. Are you sure? She asked. Yes, I said. Eleanor said 20 minutes. If he raises his voice, I'm coming in. If he raises his voice, let him. Audrey looked at me, then smiled. I don't know who you've become, Sylvia, but I really like her. I looked through the glass at Gideon. He had dressed carefully a charcoal sweater, freshly shaved. His wedding ring was on the table next to his Americano. In front of him sat a bouquet of white tulips. My favorite, back when they were a gesture and not a strategy. I think she was always here, I said. She was just very tired. Inside, the coffee shop smelled of espresso and cinnamon. Gideon stood up when I approached. His face softened in that practiced, sorrowful way. Sylvia. I sat down, ignoring the tulips. He sat too. You look tired, he said. You asked to speak. His mouth tightened, then relaxed. I deserve that. No, I thought. You deserve worse, but I'm saving that for Eleanor. Gideon pushed the tulips toward me. I'm so sorry. The words hung between us. They didn't land. For what? I asked. He blinked. It was a simple question. But people who are genuinely sorry usually know the answer. People who just want peace usually have to search for it. For letting things get out of hand, he said, leaning forward. I leaned back. He noticed. For moving Silas's crib, he added quickly. For not talking to you first. For taking a decision out of my hands? Yes. Which decision, Gideon? He swallowed. I could see the effort it took for him not to argue, allowing Danielle to stay. In my house? He swallowed again. In your house. It should have felt satisfying, but it didn't. A truth acknowledged only when a gun is pointed at your head is not respect. It's just a hostage negotiation. Where is she now? I asked. At a motel, an extended stay. For how long? I don't know. Is Silas your son? His face hardened. No. Did you take a paternity test? No. Why not? Because I don't need to. Danielle said he isn't. I looked at him until he looked away. That is a very flexible standard of proof. He reached across the table. I moved my hand before his fingers could touch me. A flash of genuine hurt crossed his face. Or maybe performative hurt. It was getting harder to tell the difference. I miss you, he said. I looked at the ring on the table. You miss the version of me that made your life convenient. That's not fair. Neither was finding Danielle in my daughter's nursery. He closed his eyes. For a moment, we sat in the noise of the coffee shop. The steam wand hissed. Cups clinked. The barista called out a name. Then Gideon opened a leather folder. My body understood before my brain did. There would be papers. There are always papers when men want forgiveness with terms attached. I spoke to someone, he said. A lawyer? A mediator? Sylvia, just listen. He slid a document toward me. It wasn't a divorce petition. It was a temporary family agreement. I read the header. Interim co-parenting and residential agreement. My fingers went cold. This would let us slow everything down, he said. Give us space to work through this without Eleanor turning it into a war. I didn't touch the paper. What does it say? Just baseline stuff. That I can remain in the home while we do counseling. That Iris split her residential time so we both have access. That Danielle won't stay there, but I can provide emergency support if needed. That neither of us makes major financial changes without mutual consent. I laughed. This time, a woman at the next table looked over. Gideon's face went red. Sylvia, please. You want me to sign an agreement that allows you to live in my house, reinstates your access to my income, and establishes a legal precedent for Iris to be in a home where you evicted her from her own nursery? His jaw set. That is a very cynical interpretation. It's a precise interpretation. He looked out the window, perhaps checking to see if Audrey was watching. She was. Her car was idling across the street. Who drafted this? I asked. He hesitated. Danielle knows someone. A family transition specialist. I stared at him. The insult was almost elegant. Danielle's friend had drafted a document for my marriage. I picked up the first page, keeping my anger tucked away. My eyes ran over the clauses. Right of occupancy, joint physical access, mutual non-disparagement, financial status quo, prohibition of recording or surveillance without written consent. There it was. He wanted to neutralize the Nest Protect camera. I laid the paper back down. Did you read this? Yes. Did you understand it? I understood enough. Then you understood it protects you. It protects us. From what? His face flushed. From turning this into a circus. It became a circus when you invited Danielle into my child's room. He leaned closer. Keep your voice down. No. The woman at the next table looked over again. Gideon saw her and shifted into wounded husband mode. I'm trying, Sylvia, he said softly. Can't you see that? I'm here. I'm apologizing. I'm asking for counseling. Counseling doesn't require me to sign away my property rights. You are twisting everything. I pulled out my phone and took a photo of every page of the document. Gideon reached for the papers. What are you doing? Saving a copy. This is confidential. You handed it to me. I didn't say you could send it to Eleanor. I didn't ask. His hand clamped down on the folder. For a second, I saw the anger behind the soft sweater, the quiet, small-minded anger of a man who expected my hurt to make me compliant. I stood up. Gideon stood too. Sylvia, don't walk away. I picked up the tulips and handed them back to him. He stared at them. No flowers, I said. No private chats. No documents from Danielle's friends. People were definitely listening now. Gideon's voice fell to a whisper. You are humiliating me again. I tilted my head. Again? His eyes flared. He realized the trap a second too late. I smiled. Thank you. For what? For reminding me that you think accountability is humiliation. I walked out. He followed me to the parking lot, the folder under his arm, the tulips slightly crushed in his hand. Sylvia? Audrey opened her car door. I shook my head once. She stayed put, but her eyes never left him. Gideon stopped by my door. You can't divorce me over one room. One room. The refrain of the small-minded. As if repetition could shrink the scale of the theft, I turned to him. You still don't get it, I said. Then explain it. You gave away a room you didn't own, to a woman you had no right to bring into our marriage, for a baby you used to make me feel cruel. And when I left, you tried to turn my boundaries into a mental health crisis, my financial security into financial abuse, and my evidence into spying. His face went pale. It's not just one room. He swallowed. I panicked. No, I said. You planned. His eyes darted. I saw it then. He knew about the dates. He knew what Mrs. Gable had seen. He knew his story was coming apart. I was trying to help, he whispered. But the words sounded thin even to him. You were trying to feel important to Danielle without losing the life I built for you. His mouth opened, then closed. It was the closest to an admission I would ever get. I unlocked the car. He took a step closer. Can I see Iris? Not today. I'm her father, and you will have a court-ordered schedule. His face twisted. You're going to make me ask permission to see my own daughter? You made her ask permission to keep her own room. His hand came down on the roof of my SUV, blocking the door. Audrey started across the street. I looked at his hand. Move. He let go, not because he wanted to, but because the audience changed the math. I got in and locked the door. My phone buzzed as I pulled out. Eleanor. I received the photos of the agreement. Do not meet him alone again. That was a legal setup. I looked back in the rearview mirror. Gideon was still standing there, holding the white tulips, looking less like a husband begging for his marriage, and more like a man watching the vault door close. I pulled up next to Audrey's car, rolled down my window, and handed her the tulips. She looked at them. What am I supposed to do with these? Compost. She smiled. The most useful thing he's contributed in years. I laughed. The sound startled me. It was small, rusty, and slightly painful, but it was mine. That afternoon, Eleanor filed the divorce petition. The first public lie came from Constance, and it wasn't on Facebook. She was too careful for that. She used the family group chat, the one she treated like a church bulletin when she wanted sympathy and a courtroom when she wanted control. Constance, please keep Gideon, Sylvia, Iris, Danielle, and little Silas in your prayers. Sylvia is struggling deeply with postpartum issues and has left the marital home. Gideon is doing everything he can to protect both children from further disruption. Please do not judge what you do not understand. Audrey took a screenshot because Fiona had forwarded it to her with 3 words. This is sick. I read Constance's message while Iris slept on my chest, warm and heavy with milk. Both children. Further disruption. Struggling deeply. There are lies that invent, and lies that rearrange. Constance's lie did both. She's building a record, Audrey said. Suangwai. I forwarded it to Eleanor. Her reply arrived within 10 minutes. We are sending a cease and desist regarding defamatory statements today. Keep saving. The second lie came from Danielle. Her Instagram post was subtle enough that strangers could offer comfort without realizing they were participating in a theft. A photo of Silas's hand wrapping around her finger. The caption, sometimes you find shelter in unexpected places, and sometimes people punish you for accepting kindness. A baby should never be the target of adult jealousy. Praying for peace. No names, no details. But the comments underneath blossomed into a garden of performative sympathy. You are so strong. Some women hate seeing men do the right thing. Protect your peace, mama. Jealousy is a disease. I stared at the screen until my eyes burned. Audrey reached over and took my phone. No. I need screenshots. I'll take them. You don't need to read the comments. I'm fine, Audrey. You don't have to be fine while people are calling you jealous for protecting your daughter. I have to be smart. She sighed, but gave the phone back. I took the screenshots. Then I saw that Gideon had liked the post. Something inside me went very quiet. Not because I was surprised, but because the man who claimed he wanted private healing had publicly validated the story that I was a bitter woman punishing a child. The third lie came from Gideon's work. It arrived via Miles Garrison, a teacher at Wellington Prep whose wife had been a design client of mine. He called from an unknown number, his voice hesitant from the first hello. Sylvia? It's Miles Garrison. Sorry to bother you. Miles, hi. Is everything okay? I don't know. I shouldn't be calling, probably. I sat up. Iris stirred. What is it? He let out a breath. Gideon mentioned at the faculty meeting that you were dealing with some severe postpartum health issues. He said there might be a custody situation. He told the headmaster he was under an immense amount of personal stress because you had taken Iris from the home during an episode. An episode. For a second, the room tilted. Audrey saw my face and reached for Iris. I let her take her before my arms forgot they were supposed to be safe. What else did he say? I asked, my voice tight. Miles lowered his voice. He asked if the school's emergency housing fund had resources for a temporary placement for a family in crisis. He said he was trying to house a displaced mother and infant. He's using the school's fund for Danielle? I don't know. I know he requested a letter on Wellington letterhead for a housing nonprofit. He said it was for a family connected to the school community. Danielle Ashford doesn't have any connection to Wellington, Sylvia. That's why I'm calling. I closed my eyes. Gideon hadn't stopped at my house, my money, and my daughter's nursery. He had started borrowing the moral authority of his institution. Can you send me whatever you have? I asked. I can email the memo he sent to the staff. I don't want to get involved, Sylvia. Unless there's an official inquiry. I understand. Thank you for calling, Miles. He paused. Sylvia? My wife had postpartum anxiety with our second. It was hard. But it never made me move another woman into our house. I pressed my fingers to my eyes. Thank you, I whispered. After we hung up, I sent everything to Eleanor. She called instead of texting. This is escalating, she said. We aren't waiting for the standard timeline. I'm filing for an emergency temporary order tomorrow. Exclusive use of the marital residence and a temporary parenting plan. We're also going to address the defamation, she added. We can make continuing this narrative very expensive for him. It was the most lawyerly response possible, and I loved her for it. By evening, Gideon had been served. He called 11 times. I didn't answer. Then he showed up at Audrey's house. The doorbell rang at 8:36 p.m. Iris had just fallen asleep. Audrey and I froze in the living room, both staring at the hallway. The bell rang again. Then, a knock. Sylvia, Gideon called out. I know you're in there. Audrey, open the door. Audrey stood up. I'm calling the police. Wait, I said. Let him talk through the door. If he doesn't leave, we call. Another knock. Harder. Sylvia, open the door. Iris began to cry from the guest room. My body moved before my brain did. I went to her, lifted her, and held her close. Her face was red, furious at being woken. I rocked her in the dark hallway, listening to Audrey speak through the front door. You need to leave, Gideon. I need to see my wife. His voice came, muffled but clear. She told you not to come here. This is my family, Audrey. No, Audrey said. This is my house. Move off the porch. Gideon said something quieter. Audrey's voice rose. Get off my property, Gideon. I walked into the entryway with Iris. Gideon saw me through the narrow glass pane next to the door. His face shifted. Sylvia, he said, leaning closer to the glass. Please. Iris was crying louder now. The sight of him did something terrible to my chest. Not love, not anymore. Just the ghost of it, beating against a wall. He looked broken, but brokenness is not repentance. I stayed behind the locked door. You need to leave, Gideon. I just want to talk. Email Eleanor. I'm not emailing a lawyer to talk to my wife. You don't have a wife who talks to you alone anymore. He winced. It was good. He needed to feel the clean edge of the ruin. I made mistakes, he said, his voice dropping. I know that now. Then go home. Let me see Iris. No. She's crying because you woke her up. That hit him. His eyes flicked to her, then back to me. I miss her, he said. His voice cracked. My own throat tightened, despite everything. I believe you, I said. And you will see her according to the court's schedule. Not before. Don't do this, Sylvia. Don't turn me into a weekend visitor. You turned yourself into someone I can't trust in my house. He looked past me, into Audrey's hallway, as if searching for the old Sylvia somewhere behind me. Then his face went hard. Do you know what my lawyer said? There it was. He said mothers who hide children look unstable in court. Audrey went very still. I adjusted Iris, holding her higher. You should tell your lawyer, I said, that threatening a postpartum mother on her sister's porch after being told to stay away does not look particularly stable either. His mouth thinned. Audrey raised her phone, showing him the screen recording app. I'm recording this, Gideon. Gideon took a step back. You're all recording me now, he said bitterly. You taught us to keep evidence, Audrey said. He looked at me. This isn't you. For the first time, that phrase didn't hurt. It clarified. No, I said. It's me without the obligation to protect you from yourself. He stared at me. Down the street, a police cruiser turned the corner. Audrey had called them after all. Gideon saw the blue lights and took another step back. The officer spoke to him on the sidewalk. I couldn't hear the words through the door, but I saw Gideon gesturing toward the house, saw his face smooth into that reasonable man expression, saw the officer look at Audrey, then back to him. A few minutes later, Gideon walked to his car. Before he got in, he texted, You called the cops on Iris's father. I looked at him through the window, then wrote, Iris's father came to a house he was told to avoid and woke her up by screaming. He read it, his shoulders dropping. But before I could feel any pity, another text arrived from an unknown number. A screenshot of Danielle's latest Instagram story. No caption, just a photo of the empty wall in Iris's nursery where her nameplate had been, and beneath it a single sentence. Some rooms were never meant to belong to just one child. I stared at it until the words blurred. Then I forwarded it to Eleanor. Her reply was brief. Tomorrow, we take the room back. Eleanor arrived at Sycamore Terrace at 9 a.m. She was wearing a charcoal coat, carrying a leather briefcase, and wore the serene expression of a woman about to ruin someone's morning with civil procedure. Behind her stood a locksmith, a home inspector, and Deputy Miller, the same deputy who had responded to Audrey's house. Mrs. Gable was standing on her porch next door, Barnaby in her arms, watching like a witness prepared by God and neighborhood curiosity. I arrived last, not because I was afraid, but because I had to feed Iris first. Audrey stayed with her in the SUV, parked across the street. The sight of my daughter through the rear window kept me steady. She was wearing her little lavender hat, her tiny hand raised to her face. This is your house, Eleanor said gently as I stepped onto the sidewalk. I looked at the blue door for the first time since I had left. Yes, Gideon opened the door before we could knock. His eyes traveled from Eleanor to the deputy, to the locksmith, and then to me. What is this? Eleanor handed him an envelope. A copy of the emergency order for exclusive use of the residence, signed by Judge Vargas. We are here to secure the property and document the state of the home. Gideon didn't take the envelope. It hovered between them. Where is Iris? In the car. His jaw set. You brought the police to my house. Eleanor corrected him. Sylvia's house. He looked at her with pure venom. I wasn't talking to you. Deputy Miller took a half step forward. Not aggressive, just present. Gideon took the envelope. From inside, Danielle's voice called out, Gideon? She appeared behind him, wearing leggings and an oversized shirt. Her face was pale, her hair messy. Silas was on her hip. Her eyes widened when she saw the group on the porch. Sylvia? She said, her voice shaking. What are you doing? Taking my house back, I said. Her mouth tightened. You can't just throw a baby onto the street. No, Eleanor said. We are evicting an unauthorized adult occupant. The baby, of course, goes with his mother. Danielle's eyes flashed. You are cold-hearted people. I looked at Silas. He was chewing on a plastic keys toy, blinking at the morning sun. No, I said. We are precise. Gideon stepped onto the porch, pulling the door shut behind him. We don't need to do this in public. The neighbors are watching. Mrs. Gable raised her mug from her porch. Eleanor opened her folder. They've been watching for some time, Gideon. Mrs. Gable has already provided her security footage and a signed affidavit. Gideon looked at me, his face darkening. You turned my neighbor against me? No, I said. You threatened her grandson. His face twitched. Deputy Miller noted the reaction. Gideon, Danielle murmured, touching his arm. What do we do? Pack your things, Eleanor said. The locksmith is here to change the codes. You have 2 hours to remove your personal property. Anything left behind will be inventoried and stored at your expense. 2 hours? Gideon yelled. That's impossible. The order was signed yesterday afternoon, Gideon, Eleanor said. You've had ample notice. We walked into the house. The entryway was different. Our wedding photo was gone. In its place stood Silas's toy bin and a framed print I hadn't seen before. Something beige and inspirational about family by choice. I looked away before the anger could distract me. In the living room, Danielle's blankets were folded on the sectional. A half-empty coffee mug sat on the side table next to a stack of parenting books. Gideon's laptop was open on the kitchen island. The house looked lived in by people who believed ownership was established by clutter. Eleanor directed the inspector to begin photographing every room. Gideon followed him, muttering under his breath. This is ridiculous. This is harassment. Eleanor ignored him. Danielle stood by the stairs, holding Silas, watching me as if I were the intruder. I went upstairs first. The hallway smelled of baby powder and a different shampoo. Iris's bassinet was gone from the hall. For a brief, wild second, my heart surged. Then I opened the nursery door. The room was half empty. Silas's gray crib was still in the center, under the Cloud Mobile. Iris's white crib had been disassembled and leaned against the wall like scrapwood. Her glider had a blue blanket thrown over the back. The dresser drawers were pulled out, her clothes and Silas's mixed together in a heap on the floor. The wooden nameplate Iris Rose was lying on the closet floor, face down. I walked over and picked it up. The white paint was chipped, the delicate lettering scratched. From the doorway, Gideon's voice came, low and rough. I was going to fix it. I turned. He was standing there. Behind him stood Eleanor, Danielle, and Deputy Miller. You were going to fix it? I asked. Yes. When? He looked down. Danielle said, It fell. I looked at her. It fell? She raised her chin. Yes. Eleanor pulled her tablet from her bag. Let's check the recording. Gideon's head snapped up. No. Eleanor ignored him. She set the tablet on the changing table and tapped the screen. The backup Nest Protect footage began to play. Friday, 6:12 p.m. Danielle was standing in the nursery, holding the Iris Rose nameplate. She was arguing with Gideon, who was partially off camera. You keep acting like this room is holy ground because Sylvia painted some clouds, Danielle said on the tape. It's a bedroom, Gideon. Gideon's voice. Put it down, Danielle. No. She wants a shrine? Fine. She threw the sign. It hit the hardwood floor with a sharp, loud crack. The sound echoed in the actual room. No one moved. Danielle's face went white. Gideon closed his eyes. The video kept playing. Danielle's voice on the tape. Maybe now it can stop being Iris's room. I paused the video. The silence that followed was heavier than the room itself. Deputy Miller looked at Danielle, his expression neutral but assessing. Eleanor said, That is one clip. We have several others from the past month, including the conversations regarding the Wellington Prep Fund. Gideon looked at me, and for the first time, there was no anger in his eyes. Only the cold realization that the stage he had built had collapsed, and the audience was watching him stand in the ruins. Pack your things, Danielle, he said quietly. She looked at him, then at the deputy, then at me. Without a word, she walked past us and began grabbing clothes from the dresser, stuffing them into her pink suitcase with sharp, angry jerks. Gideon didn't help her. He stood in the center of the nursery, staring at the chipped wooden nameplate in my hand. I'm sorry, he whispered. Tell it to the judge, I said. The mediation room had no windows. It felt appropriate. Some truths don't need sunlight. They need fluorescent bulbs, paper copies, and a table wide enough to keep people from reaching each other. Gideon sat opposite me in a dark suit, the one he usually wore for donor meetings at Wellington Prep. His wedding ring was still on. I noticed, because he kept spinning it with his thumb, a nervous habit I had once found endearing. Now, it just looked like a small piece of gold trying to find an exit. Constance sat next to him, though she had no legal standing. Eleanor had allowed her because Gideon's attorney, a tired-looking man named Mr. Vance, had suggested it might keep his client calm. Danielle wasn't there. She had moved into an apartment in the North End, funded by a personal loan Tristan had taken out to get her out of the family's hair. According to Fiona, Danielle had called Gideon 40 times in 3 days. He hadn't answered most of them. His courage had always been loudest when someone else was paying the bill. We started with custody. I want 50-50, Gideon said, his voice flat. My stomach clenched. Eleanor's hand moved slightly on her notepad, a silent reminder to stay resolved. The mediator, a woman named Mrs. Chen, looked at him. Iris is 3 months old and exclusively breastfed. Is that correct? She takes a bottle, Gideon said. She takes pumped milk. Occasionally, I said. She has reflux. Her pediatrician is monitoring her weight. I can learn to manage that, Gideon said. You should have learned before you took away her room, I said. His face flushed. That's not fair. When was her last doctor's appointment, Gideon? He opened his mouth. Nothing came out. What medicine does she take for her reflux? His jaw tightened. What time does she usually cluster feed? Constance whispered. Gideon, please. He looked down at the table. I hated that I felt sad. I hated that part of me still wanted him to know these things, not for my case, but for our daughter. Eleanor laid Iris's pediatric journal on the table. Feedings, diapers, weight logs, medication schedules, appointment dates. Beside it, she laid Gideon's proposed custody schedule. Mr. Gideon is asking for joint physical custody of an infant currently under the sole care of her mother, Eleanor said. While he currently resides in temporary housing, is under investigation by his employer for misuse of school funds, and recently moved another adult and child into his daughter's nursery without consent. Mr. Vance rubbed his temples. Gideon snapped. You're making me sound like a monster. Eleanor looked at him. You displaced her from her sleeping environment, ignored her mother's postpartum recovery, and attempted to use residential access as leverage. The word monster is yours, Mr. Gideon. I'm just listing the facts. Mrs. Chen cleared her throat. We will recommend standard, supervised visits at a family support center twice a week, transitioning to unsupervised day visits only upon completion of a parenting class and proof of stable, independent housing. Gideon looked as if he had swallowed glass. Supervised? At a center? Like I'm a threat to my own kid? No one answered. We moved to finances, Eleanor said. She projected the bank statements onto the screen. A particular kind of silence fills a room when the numbers start to speak. Hotel stay. March 9th. Whole Foods. March 12th. CVS. March 15th. Movers. April 20. 9th. Every dollar spent on Danielle from our joint account. Gideon stared at the screen. Constance stared at Gideon. Mr. Vance stared at his legal pad. These expenses were paid from the joint account, which was funded primarily by Sylvia's separate trust transfers, Eleanor said. I was helping a friend in crisis, Gideon said, his voice barely audible. Eleanor clicked to the next slide. Mrs. Gable's security footage. March 9th. Danielle arriving with her suitcases. March 13th. Gideon carrying her boxes. April 12th. The crib delivery. The timeline does not support a sudden crisis, Eleanor said. The move-in was planned weeks before the alleged flood. Constance put her hand over her mouth. Gideon looked at the table. Danielle. She exaggerated some things. I looked at him. Even now, he was choosing himself over her. Not me, never me. Just the safest exit available. You're saying she lied? I asked. He didn't answer. No, I said, leaning forward. You chose to believe her because it made you feel important. You wanted to be the savior, and Constance wanted me to be the quiet wife who paid the bills. You dressed it up as charity because charity sounds better than entitlement. Gideon stared at me. I didn't look away. My voice didn't shake. That was the victory. Eleanor moved to the next slide. Constance's medical expenses. Insurance premiums, copays, physical therapy invoices. 3 years of records. Total, $42,000. Constance let out a soft gasp. Gideon closed his eyes. Sylvia is not seeking reimbursement for these historical payments, Eleanor said. However, they are relevant to disprove the counterclaim that Sylvia engaged in financial abuse by freezing the joint accounts. Constance looked at me, her eyes wide. I didn't know it was that much. You didn't ask, I said. For the first time, she looked at me without her pearls of wisdom. No lectures, no maternal superiority. Just an older woman realizing that the daughter-in-law she had called unstable had spent $42,000 keeping her stable. I'm sorry, she whispered. Gideon's head snapped toward her. The apology was too late, and too small, but it was the first honest sound she had ever made. I nodded once. Not forgiveness, just receipt. Eleanor opened the school file. Gideon went rigid. Mr. Vance sat up. I don't see how employment matters are relevant here, Vance said. They are relevant because Mr. Gideon used school resources and Wellington Prep letterhead to secure housing for his mistress, while telling the school administration that his wife was suffering from postpartum psychosis, Eleanor said. She displayed Gideon's email to the Wellington Housing Committee. He had requested emergency funds for a displaced Wellington family, using his official signature. He had CC'd the school's donor relations director, Constance whispered. "Gideon, what did you do?" "I was trying to help," he hissed. The room swallowed his excuse. Mr. Vance touched Gideon's sleeve. "Gideon, stop." Gideon looked at me. "You're trying to ruin my career." "I didn't write those emails, Gideon. You did. You were my wife. And you were in Iris's nursery while I was in the hospital." He flinched. Not because he was sorry, but because everyone else was watching. Mrs. Chen called a recess. I walked into the hallway. Fiona was waiting with Iris. She had become an unexpected ally, not close, but steady. She had told Tristan that if he defended Gideon, she would take their son and spend the month at her mother's. Tristan had been remarkably quiet since then. Iris reached for me with both hands. I took her, breathing in the scent of her hair. Fiona asked, "How bad is it?" "Bad for him," I said. "Good." She shrugged. "I'm tired of pretending the peace in this family was ever real." The women just swallowed the glass. I smiled. At the end of the hall, Constance stepped out of the mediation room. She walked slowly toward us. Fiona went stiff. I did too. Constance stopped a few feet away. "Can I look at her?" I held Iris closer. Constance's face fell, but she nodded. The restraint was new. She looked at Iris from a distance. "She looks like you," she said. "She looks like herself." Constance nodded again, then whispered, "I should have asked more questions." "Yes. I was so afraid Gideon had ruined his life, and I wanted you to fix it so I didn't have to face it." It was the truest thing she had ever said. I didn't offer her comfort. She swallowed. "I'm sorry, Sylvia." Fiona looked surprised. I adjusted Iris's blanket. "Thank you for saying that," I said. Constance's eyes filled with tears. "Is there any way back?" I knew what she meant. The dinners, the holidays, the version of family where I paid the bills and smiled while Gideon took the credit. "No," I said. She closed her eyes. When we returned to the table, Gideon looked small. The final issue was the house. Eleanor laid out the trust documents, the deed, and the sole and separate property agreement. Mr. Vance didn't even try to fight. No legal argument could turn his signature into mine. The agreement was signed. Gideon would vacate the property on Sycamore Terrace within 14 days. Danielle would have no access. He would leave all furniture and fixtures in the nursery. He would pay a lump sum of $15,000 to resolve the unauthorized joint account withdrawals. Gideon stared at the signature line. "I have nowhere to go," he whispered. The words echoed Danielle's in the nursery. I looked at him across the table. "I know," I said. His eyes flicked up, a brief spark of hope in his face. I finished. "It must be terrifying to have the owner of the room say no." He looked away. By the time we left, Gideon had lost custody, his home, his financial cover, and the reputation he had used to make me look fragile. Not all at once, but piece by piece, like an empty nursery. That night, he texted me from his personal number. I went back to get my clothes. "The house feels different." I didn't reply. I found Iris's nameplate on the dresser. "Did you take it?" I looked at the nameplate sitting on Audrey's kitchen table. I had filled the scratches with fresh white paint that afternoon while Iris slept. It was hers. He sent one last text. "I don't know who I am without you in that house." I held Iris against my chest and looked out at Audrey's small backyard, where the porch light threw a circle of gold onto the grass. For years, I had mistaken his need for me for love. Now, Gideon had to meet himself without the house I had built around him. I didn't hate him, but I wasn't going to save him either. When I moved back into the house, it was quiet. Not peaceful, just quiet. There is a difference. Peace belongs to places that have healed. Quiet is what's left when the noise is gone, and the walls are still deciding what they remember. Gideon had moved out 3 days before the deadline. He had left a floor lamp, 2 boxes of books, and a faint, circular indentation on the nursery rug where Silas's crib had stood. Danielle had left nothing but a blue pacifier under the glider and a scratch inside the bottom drawer of Iris's dresser. Eleanor had told me to wait until the inspection was complete before changing anything. So I walked through the house with her, the inspector, and a clipboard, noting what was missing, what was damaged, what was mine, what was Iris's. Our wedding photo was in the hall closet, face down. I left it there, not because it was too painful to touch, but because I no longer needed to display evidence of a marriage that had only looked happy. In the primary bedroom, the air was stale. Gideon had taken his clothes, but left the framed print above the dresser, the one we bought on our first anniversary from a street artist in Savannah, 2 sailboats on gray water. I stared at it. Eleanor stood in the doorway, her clipboard under her arm. "You don't have to decide everything today," she said. "I know. That too was new. I used to believe decisions had to be made immediately to prevent other people's discomfort. Now, discomfort could wait its turn. The nursery was last. I stood outside the door, holding the freshly painted Iris Rose nameplate. Audrey was downstairs with Iris, giving me this moment alone. The doorframe was empty. 2 gray adhesive squares showed where the old tape had pulled off the paint. A faint scratch near the handle marked where Gideon had dragged the crib out. I pushed the door open. The room felt larger without the gray crib. Iris's white crib had been reassembled by the window. Tristan had helped Audrey carry it up, mumbling an apology while he tightened the bolts. "I should have asked Gideon what the hell he was doing," he'd said. I accepted the apology, not because it fixed anything, but because some men need practice saying the truth, even when it's late. The Cloud Mobile turned slowly in the draft from the vent. The pink rug had been cleaned. The dresser drawers held only Iris's things, her socks, her onesies, her blankets, her little hats. Her books were back on the shelf. The plush bunny sat in the glider like a patient sentry. For a second, I saw the other crib. The blue blanket. Danielle's face. Gideon holding the muslin blanket, as if it were an inconvenience. Then I blinked, and the shadow vanished. Not forgotten, never forgotten, but catalogued, filed away in the legal documents, in the part of me that would never again mistake silence for safety. The divorce wasn't final, but the temporary orders were signed. Gideon had his supervised visits twice a week at the community center. He had moved into a 1-bedroom apartment near Wellington Prep, though the school had placed him on administrative leave pending the investigation into his housing fund requests. Danielle had stopped posting on social media after Eleanor sent the formal warning. Constance had stopped calling for money. The family group chat was entirely silent after Fiona posted, "Sylvia didn't leave Gideon." Gideon moved another woman into Iris's nursery while Sylvia was in the hospital. Stop lying to yourselves. No one argued. That's the thing about the truth. It doesn't need an applause. Sometimes, the silence of the liars is enough. I held the Iris Rose nameplate against the door to check the height. My phone buzzed. "Gideon." I let it ring. Then a text. "I'm parked outside. I know I shouldn't be. Just give me 5 minutes." My body went rigid. I looked out the window. His car was at the curb. For a second, the anger flared hot and sharp. Then I remembered Eleanor's instructions. Document. Do not react. I typed, "You are not permitted on the property without notice, Gideon. Leave. Please, Sylvia. No fighting. I didn't come to take anything," he wrote. "Leave." "I saw your car," he replied. "I remembered the day we painted this room." "I can't breathe, Sylvia." I closed my eyes. The memory came, whether I wanted it to or not. Gideon standing barefoot on the stepladder, paint on his wrist, laughing because I had drawn pencil clouds all over the wall and insisted they needed different textures. Gideon putting his hand on my stomach when Iris kicked. Gideon saying, "She's going to know she was loved before she even opens her eyes." That memory hurt more than the betrayal, because that man had existed. Maybe not fully, maybe not as securely as I had believed, but enough for me to mourn him. My phone buzzed. "I know I ruined everything. I know. But I love you." I looked around the nursery. Love wasn't a text sent from the curb after you lost your lease. Love wasn't nostalgia when the room was empty and clean. Love would have protected Iris's name on the door when I was too weak to stand. I walked downstairs. Audrey was in the living room, Iris chewing on her own fist. "Gideon is outside," I said. Audrey stood up. "I'm calling the police." "No," I said. "I'll speak to him on the porch." Record from the window. "Sylvia, I want this finished." So do I. I looked at her. The door stays open. The door stays open, she agreed. I stepped onto the porch. Gideon was standing at the bottom of the steps. He looked thinner, his clothes hanging differently. His hair was messy. His face changed when he saw me as if he had expected anger and found only distance. The distance terrified him more. Hi, he said. You have 5 minutes, I said, staying on the top step. He stayed on the walkway. Geography is a boundary. Documents are a boundary. Locked doors are a boundary. Gideon looked past me into the house. It looks different. It is. You put the nursery back? Yes. His eyes filled with tears. I didn't reach for him. I keep thinking about that Friday, he said. You standing in the doorway. I thought you were going to scream. I thought if I stayed calm, you'd just see that it was okay. I know. You don't think I cared about how you felt? No, I said. You didn't care how I felt until other people found out. He winced. I deserved that. You deserved worse, but I'm tired. He nodded. The tears running down his cheeks now. I was selfish. I liked being needed by Danielle. I liked being the good guy. I looked at him. It was the closest to the truth he had ever come without a lawyer prompting him. With you, he whispered. I always felt like you could handle everything. The house, the money, the baby, my mother. You were so capable. Danielle made me feel like I mattered. And instead of mattering by being a good husband and father, I said, you took the safety from my life and handed it to her. His face crumpled. I don't know how to fix this. You don't. He stared at me. The words settled between us, cold and clean. There has to be something, he whispered. I can go to therapy. I can do the classes. I can never speak to Danielle again. That might make you a better father to Iris someday, I said. And us? There is no us, Gideon. He closed his eyes. From inside the house, Iris let out a happy, bubbling shriek. Gideon's eyes flew open, wet and desperate. Can I see her? No. Your visit is Friday at the center. I'm her father. Then learn to show up when she's safe, not when you're desperate. He put his hand over his mouth, his shoulders shaking. I saw his ruin. And for a second, the old habit flared up. Fix it. Soften it. Give him a bridge. But then Iris shrieked again, and the habit broke. Protect her. Protect yourself. Let him carry his own weight. Gideon dropped his hand. Do you hate me? I thought about lying. Hate would have been easier for him than the truth. No, I said. A flicker of hope crossed his face. I put it out gently. I'm just done loving you at the expense of my daughter. His shoulders slumped. I'm sorry, he whispered. I know. Does it matter? It matters to you, I said. But not to my decision. He looked up at the second-floor window. I really did love that room, Sylvia. No, I said. His eyes returned to mine. You loved the house where I made beautiful things, I said. But you didn't love the room enough to protect the girl it belonged to. He had no answer. A car pulled into the driveway next door. Mrs. Gable got out, carrying a grocery bag. She looked at Gideon, then at me. She gave me a small, firm nod before walking up her steps. Gideon saw it. The shame settled back onto his face. I should go, he said. Yes. He turned, then stopped. Sylvia? I waited. If Iris ever asks, what will you tell her? The truth, I said. When she's old enough, he swallowed. Will you tell her I loved her? I won't lie for you, Gideon. Love her enough now so she doesn't have to ask. That broke whatever was left. He nodded once, turned, and walked down the path. I watched him go. Not because I wanted him to turn back, but because I wanted to see the car disappear. When the street was empty, I went inside and locked the door. Audrey stopped the recording. You okay? I thought about it. I'm sad, I said. But I'm okay. She put her arm around me. Iris wedged between us, chewing on her sleeve as if she had solved the mystery of the world. I took my daughter upstairs. The nameplate was waiting by the door. I peeled the backing off the new adhesive strips. My hands didn't shake. Iris watched from her crib, fascinated by the movement of the clouds above her. The morning sun filled the room with pale golden light. I pressed the sign to the wood. Iris rose. Not hidden in a closet. Not scratched on the floor. Not negotiable. I took a step back. It was level. Behind me, Iris made a soft, gurgling sound. I turned and lifted her from her crib. She smelled of warm cotton and lavender lotion. Her small hand reached out, catching the chain of my necklace, holding on tight. "This is your room, Iris," I whispered to her. "Not because the walls make you safe, but because I will." She blinked up at me. Downstairs, my phone buzzed with an email from Eleanor. The temporary order was officially entered. I read the notification on my watch, then let it go. I sat in the glider, and for the first time, I didn't see Danielle. I held Iris to my chest, and we rocked under the watercolor clouds I had painted by hand. The room was no longer empty. It wasn't the room Gideon had left me. It was the room I had taken back. And as my daughter fell asleep against my heart, I understood something simple and immense. Leaving hadn't broken our family. It had saved the only part of it that still knew how to love without taking up someone else's space.